בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל. אבא שם על השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל. שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל. לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
From beginning spoke to futures untold, the white and blue live forever unfurled. Our armies building us unite, still forward into the futures untold.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 974 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today, the Chechens have decided to one-up the North Koreans on the front lines in Ukraine by messing around with the Russians, which is insane. And also, a South Korean base housing U.S. soldiers exploded into flames today in a likely sabotage attempt. And it's also good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been getting major news today out of multiple different areas, including inside of the Russian Federation, as shocking news has come out as Chechen gunmen, most likely funded and operated by the Chechen government under Ramzan Kadyrov, attacked a Russian convoy today inside of the borders of the Republic of Chechnya, killing 3 Russian soldiers outright and destroying an entire supply truck. It is a major event that we believe is attached to the blood feud, and showing that the Chechens are starting to take armed action not against Russian Interior Ministry members in the FSB and other similar organizations, but now directly against the Russian armed forces as well. Meanwhile, all the way over in South Korea, we have seen that there has been a major attack or a sabotage attempt, we're assuming one or the other, that has happened on a U.S. military base inside of the port of Busan. We have seen that a major fire has broken out in this area. And while not a large amount of information has come out, it does seem as though it is leaning itself heavily towards some sort of a sabotage by a North Korean sympathizer or by North Korean agents that are inside of South Korea at this moment. At the exact same time as tensions have continued to stay incredibly high in North Korea and South Korea today, we have seen that the South Koreans have declared that they will be conducting an act of payback or vengeance against the North Koreans for their hostile and decisive actions inside of Ukraine, stating that they will be teaming up with Poland to be able to make this sort of a payback come into fruition, which we have a pretty strong reason to believe that it will be following a certain kind of a path. Meanwhile, disaster has struck inside of the BRICS Alliance, as the BRICS Alliance meeting has largely concluded today in the most important parts of the meeting, and we have been able to hear that both Belarus and Turkey have been put on the bench for joining BRICS. They've both been put on the quote-unquote waiting list.
BRICS is turning into the sticks at this point, man. It's turning terrible. It's a very fragile alliance. I wonder why they got sidelined like that. That's so un-Putinly of them.
It is incredibly un-Putinly. And the little mustache man of Belarus was pissed, royally pissed about the decision to bench Belarus specifically, but then he tried to vent and make it sound like he was actually standing up for Turkey. Although, everyone's intentions for BRICS to become this sort of massive unstoppable powerhouse by adding a couple of additional poor countries to it appears to not be coming into fruition anytime soon. So a pretty interesting thing to see, and I guess you could say karma truly is that of a female dog. Nevertheless, we were able to also hear in the Middle East that there are a lot of conflicting reports coming out about what's going on. We've been hearing some reports today that have been leaning themselves to the Israelis are still going to be attacking Iran within the next few days. We're also hearing from other sources that Israel has completely called off the attack and they're not going to be conducting it at all. We've also heard that Iran has stated that if they're attacked in any way, shape, or form, they will begin a full-scale regional war in the area instantaneously without any delay from that point forward. We've also been able to see that it's simultaneously the Qatari Airlines have canceled all of their flights into Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, stating the instability of the region, and at the same time, the Turkish forces are beginning to conduct large amounts of airstrikes and air operations against the Kurdish forces inside of northern Syria, northern Iraq, as well as southeastern Turkey, after some gunmen that were most likely associated with the Kurds ended up striking at the Turkish Aerospace Industries building yesterday and took hostages. We were also able to see that inside of Ukraine, some fairly interesting action has happened today. Ukrainian intelligence has confirmed that for the first time ever, North Korean soldiers have been confirmed to be fighting and in actual combat action along the front line inside of the Kursk Oblast. This was just reported around 12 hours ago. This is showing that the first elements of the North Korean expeditionary forces have finally arrived, and we have also been able to get a great deal of detail about how the North Koreans fight and how they organize themselves, as I was finally able to reference the Army Techniques Procedure, I believe it's 100.7, of the United States Army's information, which is specifically about North Korea and their tactics. And I have to tell y'all that I am very much in the camp that the North Koreans are not going to be incredibly combat effective inside the Kursk Oblast or wherever they're moved. Nevertheless, we were able to see the Ukrainian forces did continue very strong defensives around the Pokrovsk area today, as well as around the town of Toretsk, which is ending up becoming a bit of a hotspot of a battlefield in between the major battlefields at Chasiv Yar and also at Pokrovsk as well. But we have an insanely high amount of news to cover tonight, pretty much from every single corner of the world as usual. This is starting to become a little bit of a norm, really, over the past few weeks. But moving us on into our first major news of the night, we are seeing that the Third Chechen War, or at least a change of command in the semi-autonomous Republic of Chechnya, might be coming around a lot sooner than we were expecting. Many of y'all will know that in the background we have heard of a blood feud that has started to form in between Ramzan Kadyrov, the leader of Chechnya, which is a semi-autonomous, pretty much like a state, if you want to call it that, inside of Russia, and the Russian government. A little while ago, around 2.5 weeks ago, the Chechens uncovered a plot by several Russian statesmen inside the Russian State Duma, which is their equivalent to the US Congress, to assassinate and completely wipe out Ramzan Kadyrov, and possibly, although there's been some rumors on this has never been confirmed, maybe even his family members, including his children and maybe even his wife. We have seen that Ramzan Kadyrov demanded that these lawmakers be handed over to the Chechens to have swift justice brought forward onto them, and the Russian government openly refused. Just a little while after that, we then saw that some FSB members just next door inside of Ingushetia that are involved in counterinsurgency operations, specifically most likely geared towards the Chechens, ended up getting killed in a pretty significant attack. The gunmen in plural, were never uncovered, and it was never really found out who actually launched that attack, but there was a pretty decent belief that it was most likely Ramzan Kadyrov who approved that attack to try and send a message to the Russian government that if the lawmakers are not handed over, insurgencies or counterinsurgency operations would not be that successful inside of this area as the Chechens begin to build up their own forces to conduct an uprising against the Russian government. Since then, most information about the blood feud has largely gone quiet, and it's actually led us on this channel to believe that the blood feud may have completely disappeared from public eye and may have not even been a major issue. Maybe there was some sort of a behind closed doors agreement made in between Putin and Kadyrov that would pretty much quell this and stop this from becoming a major ordeal. Or at least that's what we thought until today. A Russian military convoy traveling through the area, most likely carrying troops or supplies towards from the Caucasus Mountain region and towards the area of the front lines in Ukraine, came under attack today by, and it was confirmed to be, Chechen gunmen who gunned down the convoy, killing 3 Russian service members and completely destroying a transport truck that was along the road. Here is the clip of the truck having been left by the remainder of the convoy, which sped past, of course, seeing that they were in an ambush, and showing us that this truck was riddled with bullets. I mean, they had literally been greased by these Chechen gunmen on the side of the street. And once again, it seems as though tensions down in the Caucasus Mountain region are certainly starting to rise. You see right here the bullet holes that punctured the side of the Ural 4320 that we're seeing right here. We also see some biological hydraulic fluids on the ground. And we can also
biological hydraulic fluids, man. Very, not the usual color for hydraulic fluid, but pretty close.
Not really the usual. And just past the truck, we're not going to show this part of the video, but there are a couple of Russians that were inside of the truck, the soldiers that we were talking about, that appear to have expired at some point when the truck's hydraulic fluids also expired out of the bottom of the vehicle and onto the street below. It is something to say that this is once again showing that the blood feud never died. We thought for a while that the tensions probably dropped and that this wasn't really that much of a major issue any longer, but this attack today is certainly showing that a major issue is still being made about what those Duma members tried to do against Ramzan Kadyrov, and that Kadyrov is not going to be letting this go easily. This is the first time so far in the blood feud that we've seen that Russian soldiers have been attacked and killed, and this is actually the first time in the entirety of the war that a Russian soldier at all has been killed inside of Chechnya. The fact is that Chechnya is largely run like a mafia state for the most part. The criminal underworld is literally the criminal overworld. It actually runs Chechnya itself and is wholly corrupt to its core. What we could largely describe the Chechen government to be like is literally a mafia, with Ramzan Kadyrov being the mob boss, and then, of course, he has his captains. And then below that, he has his actual foot soldiers that go out and do the dirty work out there inside of the Republic of Chechnya. We've largely believed that for this reason, this is why Chechnya has appeared to be so stable compared to the literal provinces or semi-autonomous republics that surround them, like Ingushetia, where we have seen armed uprisings being conducted by the Ingushetian Liberation Army, but nevertheless, it never crossed over into Chechnya itself. At the same time, in Dagestan, which has the main city of Makhachkala inside of it, we have also seen an uprising by another force, which we don't really want to mention too much on this channel because it has a name very similar to a major insurgent group that existed inside of Syria and Iraq, which many of y'all would know about, that was crushed by the United States and a coalition in 2018, but it has the letter K behind it in its name. But there has been an uprising inside of Dagestan by this group as well, but once again, we never saw that the chaos actually went into Chechnya itself, largely once again leading us into the believing that the Chechen government, operating largely like a criminal organization, is able to make sure that it keeps absolute control through instilling fear in the populace that if anything was to happen that they did not ordain, hell would come from above from the Chechen government themselves. This is why we certainly know that this attack today is one that isn't just some sort of a random attack that occurs. The entirety of the Caucasus Mountain region is incredibly dangerous, except for Chechnya for the Russians. And the fact that some Russian service members got killed today by Chechen gunmen is certainly leading us to believe that Ramzan Kadyrov has approved this attack and that this is a extenuation of the blood feud, and it's going to begin to completely degrade relations in between the Russian Federation and the Chechen government led by Ramzan Kadyrov. A load of people are starting to talk about this a lot. It's actually starting to get a load of attention, and we could certainly see that here as many people are coming onto this show right now to hear the news about what happened. And it seems as though a lot of people are starting to believe that this may end up being the third Chechen war. It just does not look like Kadyrov is willing to relent from his position and back off of his demands to have these lawmakers turned over to Chechen control so that way they can be executed. And the Russians are unrelenting on their position to not give up the Russian lawmakers and to pretty much just tell Kadyrov that that was tough and he's going to have to suck it up and deal with it. So it seems as though a lot of people at this moment are certainly believing that the entire region, at least Chechnya and Russia, are without a doubt on a path toward this point. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think that the third Chechen war is going to be just coming around the corner at any minute now, or do you think that this will kind of just be the crescendo of it, and then there won't really be much more from here?
All right, so after we have heard for at least a week now that Kadyrov did state that the blood feud had started, apparently it's been simmering in the background, and now it looks like it's coming to a bit of a boil. The blood is boiling now, and Chechen leader Kadyrov allegedly sent gunmen to attack a Russian supply truck, which we just saw there in the last picture. So the big question is, what is going on? So 46% said Kadyrov will start war with Russia, while 27% said we need more intel first, and only 17% said it was just some rogue guys and there's going to be no war. And on this one, I really honestly could not tell you what's happening with this because Kadyrov does want those Russian lawmakers back to Chechnya very badly because he does want to make a public example out of them because he believes they tried to assassinate him. And it sounds like maybe there was some credibility to the assassination story, but we never really got concrete evidence of that. So right now we're going on Kadyrov's word, which is not worth very much, but that's allegedly what he said was going to happen if they could get their way. So I would say that maybe these might have been some rogue guys. I have a hard time believing that Kadyrov would really start a open war with Russia over some Russian lawmakers that allegedly tried to kill him. Because, of course, the thing I was telling the enforcer before the stream started was Putin could decide to sick the North Koreans on Kadyrov right here and his men, which certainly wouldn't be a good thing. The North Koreans aren't exactly a great fighting force, but that still would be a bit of a threat to Kadyrov if they suddenly became, enemies of his and went down there to get him. So I would say I'm with the 26%. We need more intel, but I'm leaning toward the side that it was some rogue guys. But enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, it probably may end up culminating into some sort of a Chechen uprising again if the situation is not dealt with, because Ramzan Kadyrov's claims, or at least his demands, are incredibly bold of the Chechens to demand that the Russian government hands over actual Russians into Chechen jurisdiction and then have them punished by the Chechens alone. That is a pretty large ask. That is an incredibly large one, instead of just demanding that the Russian government deals with them for this kind of a thing. So for this reason, I believe that he's kind of getting onto an aspect that he may be willing to maybe conduct an armed uprising to either create an independent Chechen republic again for the second time, or better yet, he may actually be trying to conduct a Yevgeny Prigozhin, where he attempts an overthrowing of the Russian central government, which I honestly do believe is a little bit out there at this point. I don't think he would be the one to try and do that, but he certainly would be attempting to create an autonomous, well, a completely independent republic if he was to go forward with something like this. So going off of this notion, I would generally have to believe it probably will start a war with the Russian Federation if time goes by and relations do not improve and they continue to worsen like we're seeing, because this is certainly not good for anyone right now. Well, it's great for us here in the West, but it's certainly not good for anyone inside the Russian Federation or inside of Chechnya at the moment, because things are starting to get rapidly out of control, especially considering that not only has Kadyrov taken direct action against the Russian FSB, which is supposed to send a message to the Russian central government, he's now taking an action against the Russian armed forces, which once again is largely a message to the central government, but it's got a lot more of an implication behind it. It's showing that the Chechens would be more than happy to actually fight the Russian army itself, if need be, by attacking them in this manner. So I would say that this is certainly starting to move in that direction without a doubt. Also, another thing...
I personally have some doubts, enforcer, that maybe Kadyrov himself may not have ordered this, because from the way I look at it, and hold on just a second here while I get rid of one bot out of the live chat. The way I see it, though, is the Chechens are actually a pretty small army, a small military that is, and the word does get around quite a bit about Kadyrov's personal feud with Russian lawmakers, and I wonder if maybe some of his guys just simply went rogue and decided we're going to get some vengeance on the Russians for what they did to our great dear leader. Maybe that was what caused it. Because, if Kadyrov wanted to start a war with Russia, he could do something a lot more severe than this. And why'd they just choose to attack that random supply truck? Like, it seems a little bit random.
It is a little weird, but the thing is that it's not supposed to be the actual damage that's caused. It's supposed to send a message. Like, and think about this. If you ever listen to mafia stories or kind of mafia history, because a decent amount of it from the past is now known, when a mafia would try and conduct action against another, to try and send a message to him, it always wasn't, the biggest amount of monetary damage they would cause. Sometimes it was just the message itself, the offensiveness of it. Like, for example, just holding up a clothing truck that is having to have a little bit skimmed off the top by another family, and then they would hold up that truck just for the fact to send the message. Not that it was going to cause any massive monetary damage to either side, it was just insulting at its base level. And I think that's largely what Kadyrov was going for today with this kind of an action, is that it's not supposed to be causing any serious damage. It's supposed to just be sending the message, things are going to get very nasty if it keeps going this way, so you better back off and give us those lawmakers, or else things could get a lot nastier than this.
Maybe so. That could be his plan. But overall, though, I just have a hard time believing that even if Kadyrov believes that the Russian lawmakers tried to assassinate him, for him to try to start an open war with Russia, obviously Russia's pretty weakened right now because they're having to fight a war that they're losing inside of Ukraine. But at the same time, though, the Chechens really aren't equipped to really defend themselves. If Russia decided to turn the artillery on them, they're really not prepared for that, at least in my personal assessment. So, the fact that North Koreans are showing up in mass and things like that, the Chechens seem to be putting themselves right in the middle of the line of fire over an assassination attempt. It seems like they'd probably want to let it go, but maybe they're going to keep digging this even deeper, because if they suddenly start fighting with Russia, that's going to be an interesting situation to see how Russia's going to handle that, because it's going to add some complication. How's that even going to work, like a war being fought between Chechnya and Russia while the Ukraine war is going on? That'd be weird.
It would be weird, but it could work, because it has happened twice before. But that means that the Russians would have to tie up a load of military resources and personnel trying to deal with the Chechens, which is something that I have to put out there. Again, if this did turn into a war, we have a pretty decent expectation. It probably would end up looking a lot like the Second Chechen War, not the first one, because the first Chechen War was pretty much where the Russians tried to conduct their grand battle strategy that they tried in Ukraine, and obviously it's failed. And it also failed in Afghanistan when they did that back in 1979 to 1989. That also failed. So they're not going to be trying to conduct that strategy again, and if they did, they would already be taking massive losses off the bat. If they were to go to war with Chechnya again, it would be a long war, an incredibly long one. The Second Chechen War lasted from the year 2000 to 2008. So it was an 8-year-long war. It was very low intensity, however, and the Russian army moved at a wildly slow pace. It literally took them 8 to 9 years. I believe it was actually, the war ended around the middle part of 2009. There never really was an official end to it, though. So it's kind of like 2008, 2009-ish is when they believe they finally crushed the Chechen uprising. Well, not the Chechen uprising, but the Chechen Republic itself. But what we believe they would do in a third Chechen war is that they would repeat the Second Chechen War to a T, and they would just advance from the most northern area of the border of Chechnya south, eventually surround Grozny, and then slowly move into Grozny, and then go into the mountains themselves of the Caucasus Mountain region and try and wipe out any last remnants of the Kadyrov uprising that would exist. But once again, that's an incredibly resource-intensive kind of an action, very long-lasting action, and not only that, it would tie up a load of forces. The Second Chechen War involved a lot of the Russian Federation's armed forces. And let me go to the Second Chechen War right here to show you all, just in number, how many Russian forces were actually involved. So here we go. The Russians claim that their strength in 1999 was 80,000. And now, to put this into perspective, the original invading force of the Ukraine war in 2022 by the Russians was around 220,000. So this is about a little less than half the size of the invasion force that was used to attempt an invasion of Ukraine. So to give you all the idea on that, and the Chechens also claimed that it was nearly 500,000 that were involved, so, that's pretty crazy when you think about it. If that number was accurate, which we really don't know, it could be somewhere in between the middle of the Russian claim and the Chechen claim, but nevertheless, it would require a lot of manpower to deal with this kind of a slow, grinding, low intensity kind of fighting that would happen in Chechnya, and this would completely screw the Russians over. They have already put all of their actual combat and fighting power inside of Ukraine for the most part. That's why they're calling on foreign mercenaries and the North Koreans to try and just find more manpower, because they simply do not have the ability to raise an armed force at this point without declaring a full mobilization. And if they did declare a full mobilization, there could be massive chaos that ensues.
And also, Enforcer, I see some people in the live chat pointing out a very interesting point here that I really haven't thought about just yet, but I see some people saying that maybe there's some CIA involvement in this. And of course, this is just a theory that people are proposing in the live chat. This is not fact, and it's not, also, we can't report it as fact right now. But people are saying that maybe the Western response might look like this. Since the North Koreans have decided to send troops to Russia to go fight on the front lines in Ukraine, which is a new manpower source for Russia that they're pulling on, maybe the people over here in Chechnya are going to step in and then try to distract the Russians and negate that new manpower gain that the Russians just got. That could be the case, and obviously we don't know that for a fact, but that sounds like a plausible theory right there, and maybe the CIA promised the Chechens something good, like maybe their independence or something like that. So That could be possible.
Oh, that is an interesting idea, actually. That could be it. I wouldn't say that 100% though, but there could be a little bit of involvement like that, or it could entirely be for that reason. Who really knows? That still is an interesting idea, though. And we do know, like, historically, we have tried to do this before. Like, many people don't know this, but throughout World War II, we were in constant contact with everyone in the German government but Hitler, like, endlessly. We were like, hey, Hermann Goering, you want to like try and overthrow the German government? Would you like to try and overthrow Hitler? We were like, hey, Heinrich Himmler, you want to overthrow Hitler? Like, we'll give you money. Like we literally did that the entirety of the war, and it actually looked like everyone entertained it. No joke. Like from like the files that came out that were unclassified later, literally every German, like even like Heinrich Himmler, who was pretty much the second in command, he was like, money, you say? And he would actually listen to like the offer, and then he'd be like, I'll think on it, I'll keep that in mind. And at the end of the war, we actually think that he tried to act out on that, at least a little bit, but then he saw that that wasn't working, and obviously the Allies weren't going to let him get away because they were already winning, unconditional victory at that point. So then that's when Heinrich Himmler went into hiding. He dressed up like some random nobody, and then he got strangled to death somewhere out of the blue randomly, and then a British officer found him. They're like, well, he's dead, and that was the end of Heinrich Himmler's story. But nevertheless, we could have done something like that to Ramzan Kadyrov. Not that he's strangled and dead yet, but, y'all get the picture. Nevertheless,
And also, Enforcer, I see a ton of people saying the situation with the Cybertruck. Because remember, somehow Kadyrov got his hands on a Cybertruck a while back. It was allegedly shut off remotely, I think by Tesla themselves, because he's not supposed to have one over there in Chechnya. But maybe that was some type of overture or something like that, or maybe like a gesture or a gift of goodwill to maybe show him what he could get if he decided to cooperate with the West. But once again, that's just people saying stuff in the live chat, and also people just rumoring about stuff. So there's probably no correlation whatsoever, but kind of weird the timing on that.
it is kind of weird. I mean, it is really weird. And we will have to see if there is any involvement like that in the future. And if there is, I hate to tell you all this, but by the time that any of that information would become unclassified and released to the public, most of us will probably be dead by then. Like, we'll all be in like our 80s or 90s if you're my age right now, or we all will have long since passed in decades, because a lot of the stuff that we're hearing about World War II right now is actually being unclassified literally just a few years ago. It was like almost 80 years after war they started to unclassify a lot of this information, and now we get to know it. So we might not ever be able to know whether that's true or not, but it's still an interesting idea, and not that out there, to be entirely honest. It's fairly realistic in its kind of a scope or scale of what the CIA would be attempting to do. But nevertheless, we do have another large topic that pertains to the Russians, but a group of people that they're dealing with, kind of like the Chechens, which are the North Koreans. And we are getting a decent amount of information today out of the Korean Peninsula that is showing that tensions are still very high and that they're not going anywhere anytime soon. We have been able to see that down in the port of Busan today, a very famous port actually, if many of y'all do not know this, there was actually a time in the Korean War at the very beginning in 1950 that South Korea literally only existed around the port of Busan, and it was actually called the Busan Pocket, as there was literally nothing left. The North Koreans had pretty much steamrolled South Korea into an early defeat, and it was only through the major miracle of the American landing at Incheon, which is just west of Seoul, that we were able to start pushing the North Koreans back. It was an absolutely crazy point in the earlier days of the Korean War, and then after that, the United States, along with South Korea, ended up steamrolling the North Koreans all the way back up through South Korea, all the way up to the Yalu River, which borders China. Then China got involved and pushed us back down to the area around where the border is today. That's actually where we got pushed back to, and when we created the ceasefire in the peace treaty in 1953, which didn't apply to North and South Korea directly against each other, that was literally where the front line was when the treaty was signed. And that's where the borders still exist today, to give y'all a little bit of Korean history and to show y'all what in the world happened, or at least explain a little bit of the importance to the port of Busan. Nevertheless, not only is Busan an important port historically, it's also an important port strategically, as this is one of the larger ones that is able to import goods into South Korea from other countries around the world, which South Korea is very reliant on a large amount of imports. And not only that, the port of Busan is also a pretty decent American basing area where we have a decent amount of our U.S. forces that are in the area. And we were able to see that today, a large fire actually broke out at this U.S. base inside of Korea, apparently at a storage facility in the southeastern area of the port. We can actually see the fire right there, once again inside of the U.S. military facility, and we're not sure what caused the fire. Usually fires break out in this sort of an uncontrolled form, very rarely on U.S. military bases. And I'm sure some people are going to say, well, there are fires that do break out, and there is, but at least not on this scale. And this is most likely showing some form of sabotage that has happened by the North Koreans or North Korean sympathizers against U.S. forces based inside of South Korea at the moment, and possibly another form of threat that the North Koreans are trying to send, that they're going to start attacking American bases inside the peninsula. I do want to make this very clear, though, that while I'm saying this does look a lot like sabotage, we have not gotten any official statements from the U.S. government claiming that this is sabotage, and we have also seen that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has also made absolutely no statements about the incident that happened in the port of Busan today. But nevertheless, a lot of people are weighing in on this massive fire that broke out, and it does seem as though a lot of people are believing that this is most likely sabotage by the North Koreans. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking as well? Do you think that this is supposed to be some sort of a sabotage conducted by North Korea or a North Korean affiliated organization, or do you think that this was just some sort of a random fire that happens at U.S. bases because they just magically happen out of the blue for no reason when we hardly have fires like this?
All right, so as you can see in the photo right here, that is a massive fire indeed. That is no small time fire. That's a bigly one, and that is quite serious. So now that we've seen that large explosion and fire occur at the South Korean base, which houses U.S. soldiers, is it likely sabotage or simply a bad accident with sort of bad timing? So 66% said yes, it's probably sabotage, while 21% said it could be, but I need some more intel, and 6% said no, it's simply an accident. And I would say this probably could be an accident, but at the same time, the timing is so bad with the tensions rising between South Korea and North Korea, and also specifically the North Koreans making threats against the United States with nuclear weapons to harm us. This lines up at a very bad time to look like it probably could be sabotage, but once again, we don't have any concrete evidence to suggest that is the case. But how often do major fires and explosions break out at highly guarded, highly secure U.S. military bases in South Korea? Not very often. So the fact this is happening right now appears to be sabotage in my opinion. So I would say it probably is. I'm with the 65%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I'm with the 65% as well, because I just read some publications really quickly trying to skim over them, and every single article that has tried to get information on this topic from actual sources in the area have gotten nothing. It's crickets. Everyone's saying that the cause of the fire is completely unknown. And that is certainly showing that this is sabotage. There is no doubt about it in my mind, and largely we don't go on Trust Me Bros, but Trust Me Bros on this one. This is certainly some sort of an act of sabotage. There, from what we know, was absolutely no fire hazard listings that were made by the U.S. Department of Defense about the specific storage unit. It actually, crazily enough, according to what the U.S. Department of Defense is saying, it had nothing in it. The warehouse with no way to catch on fire and nothing flammable inside it just catches on fire and burns to the ground. This is some sort of a arson sabotage that has been conducted by the North Koreans to start trying to send a bit of a message, or at least to try and shake up American morale in the area, making it look like North Korean saboteurs can make it to literally anywhere, even the most southern point of South Korea, and start to attack a larger storage facilities that the United States has in such a strategic port as Busan. That's what I would largely believe at the moment, because it's not something that usually would happen. And I see a lot of people saying fires do happen, and they do, but usually not a lot of large fires happen at U.S. military bases or at U.S. military storage sites. If they did, we would hear about them a pretty good bit. The fires would be visible from a pretty good ways away if they're large, like this one, and we would be hearing about it endlessly. However, U.S. storage protocols and U.S. safety procedures on storage, I guess you could say the implementation of storage procedures, is incredibly rigorous. And that's why we see that there's not really a large amount of accidents or fires that happen at U.S. military bases or installations, especially at a storage building that is completely empty and is not listed as a fire hazard. If there was something inside the building that was flammable or had a high risk of flammability, it could easily be said said that it was an accident, but there was nothing in the building. It just caught on fire. And there's no way that a storage building just randomly catches on fire out of the blue, especially when there is no electrical fault with it that is listed. And the U.S. military is also, once again, very rigorous in inspecting buildings and making sure that they're at least not going to catch on fire. Now, I will say this, they aren't really good at catching like black mold and stuff like that. You can just ask some of the folks over at, I think it's called Fort Liberty these days. Like, they're not good at catching mold and stuff, but they're going to make sure that a building just doesn't burn to the ground, because that would be, of course, very out of character for the U.S. military at this point, according to all of the news that we've seen over the years that we've been doing this. So this is incredibly bizarre, highly weird considering the circumstances, and it's perfectly coinciding with the really high tensions that are happening right now in between North and South Korea, and the threats that have been issued by the North Koreans against the United States by putting their nuclear forces on standby for countermeasures directed at the United States and no other country at all. And so I would generally say
And
that
also,
is
it lines up. It also lines up with the hybrid warfare method that's being carried out by Russia. And I think pretty much all the countries that are allying with Russia right now, especially North Korea as well, are going to be following their lead. And Russia has been basically waging a war of hybrid warfare against the West. They're going around and sending out their saboteurs and spies to start fires in various different strategic places, such as military bases and also in military industrial places where they manufacture artillery shells and other weaponry. That's something they've been doing quite a bit. And some of the stories, like here in the United States, aren't even being reported as that. They're just being reported as random fire starting at, for example, the Scranton ammunition plant. They'll just say, oh, it's just a random fire and they got it under control. But at the same time, we're not being told the whole truth on all of these. And I think this could be another one inside of South Korea.
I would have to agree. And also, I just saw someone say, could it be an I? Like, you see what I'm seeing right there? No, not at all. That would not be that group inside of South Korea. That would make no sense at all. So moving on from that, though, and that interesting news, we have been able to hear a very pointed statement from the South Korean government today, as they have vowed that they will be responding to North Korean actions quite heavily inside of Ukraine. This comes directly from the Yonhap news agency, which is one of the one of the news agencies at the forefront inside of South Korea. And according to the information that they have, South Korea and Poland agreed to bolster a joint response against North Korean troops and their dispatchment to Russia. From what we know, South Korea has a very clear way of doing this in the moment through Hyundai Rotem. Hyundai Rotem is a very interesting kind of a company based in South Korea. Many people will know Hyundai to produce all kinds of amazing cars and vehicles. They're just known for that kind of thing, and they do a great job at it. But many of y'all may not know about the branch company, or kind of the sister company to Hyundai, Hyundai Rotem. Hyundai Rotem deals with things that are a little bit more involved than, say, a car or something along those lines. They actually have merged together with a decent other amount of several major heavy industries companies, including Hanjin, which many of y'all will love and know. They largely produce ships. Daewoo Heavy Industries, which, interestingly enough, these people manufacture nuclear power plants, thermal stations, turbines, and generators, as well as the Daewoo Industries K2, which a lot of people may know, actually, and I'm trying to pull it up here, that's why I had to pause really quickly. A lot of people may know this one because this is actually the service rifle of South Korea. It is actually produced by Daewoo Industries, and now in the modern day, it's actually produced by Hyundai Rotem. And you can actually see a Daewoo Industries K2 or a Hyundai Rotem K2 right here in a South Korean museum. It's still in service with the South Korean military today as their primary service rifle. But still,
That's pretty neat.
it is actually pretty cool, man. I'm not going to lie. And also, let me see if I can show y'all them in actual service. Let me see if they actually show y'all a picture here. They don't, but they do show that South Korea does use them currently, which is a very interesting thing. But nevertheless, moving on from the little shout out to the K2, considering that Daewoo was merged with Hyundai Rotem, Hyundai Rotem produces some very interesting kind of things. Let me just list y'all off some of the things that they do make. They make trains, which of course I'm a very big fan of. And you can actually see some pretty cool ones, like the KTX-1, which is pretty much the South Korean equivalent of the TGV from France, which is incredibly neat, and it shows that they have a great deal of industrial precision on what they do. But nevertheless, moving on from that and the trains that they also produce a wide variety of things to blow folks up, really. I mean, that's like the best way to say it. They produce the K-1 main battle tank. They then produce the K-2, which is the current main battle tank of South Korea right there, and Hyundai Rotem is the only manufacturer of the K-2 Black Panther. They also produce the K-600 Rhino, which is a combat engineering version of the K-2 Panther. They also produce the White Tiger, which is kind of like the South Korean, well, actually, it literally is the Rosamac from Poland. It's just the South Korean version of it. That was the original one that existed. They also produce 60-ton heavy equipment transporter. They also make a K-1 tank gunnery trainer, which is also transferable to the K-2, and they also create all kinds of other cool weapons and machines. And also, on top of that, I just want to remind everyone that not only do they do that, for the folks here who are watching right now in Boston, they also are producing some of y'all's new multiple units that will be used by the Metropolitan Boston, well, actually, I think it's the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority up there around the Boston area. They are actually producing some of the new multiple units that y'all will be using up there, and so this company actually has a pretty big worldwide impact, at least in the Western world, and at least with what South Korea is able to do militarily. Now, why does Hyundai Rotem matter? Why in the world have I given you all this giant spill about a company that almost sounds like a sponsorship? The reason why is because it is a sponsorship of a Western country named Poland. South Korea and Poland have actually had a pretty decent and very deep relationship recently in defense manufacturing and production, and we've actually seen that South Korea has been opening up larger manufactories inside of Poland through Hyundai Rotem to start pumping out K-2 Black Panthers for the Polish army. And not only that, if the South Koreans are saying that they're going to take direct action and support Ukraine because North Korea is there, they're most likely going to ramp up these factories at an even larger scale to produce surplus K-2 Panthers as well as additional vehicles like the Rosamac or really the Rhino to send into Ukraine to continue to supply the Ukrainians with fresh tanks and APCs. I don't know why I was about to call it the ATP. I know why, but y'all will see that in a second. But APCs to keep them going in the war effort. That is most likely the direct way that we'll believe that the South Koreans will respond at this moment. But we will, of course, have to largely wait and see what they mean by a response. It could be more than just supplying the Ukrainians with weapons and arms like they're already going to be doing. They could also send over special forces as well, or maybe even regular forces of the South Korean army. But we will, of course, have to wait and see what exactly happens with that in the future. But still, moving on from that and out of the out of the area of North Korea for a minute, we were also able to hear a little bit of an interesting update about the Koreans from the Russians. The Russians have denied, well, they have not denied the existence of the North Koreans inside of Russia. And this is, of course, finally an admittance by the Russians that the North Koreans are inside the Russian Federation. Not only that, Ukrainian intelligence inside of the Kursk Oblast today did confirm that they have finally run into North Korean soldiers that have been deployed to the front line in the Kursk region and that they are engaging them. We haven't heard of any casualties yet. We will most likely be hearing about those in a day or two if they have occurred. But another interesting thing is that we have an exact number of North Koreans now, and this is a very interesting thing. The number of DPRK military forces transferred to Russia is now about 12,000. So it's 2,000 higher than our initial number of 10,000. Among them are 500 officers, and in particular, there are 3 generals that are included in this list. Moscow.
Oh no, 3 generals? No way, man. And they sent a whole 3 generals over there to Russia? How many generals does North Korea even have?
A lot, actually. Like, they have loads of them, man. Like, it's a crazy number. But what's very interesting about this is that 12,000, that's kind of big. If you put 12,000 guys together, let's say they're just in a brigade kind of a structure, that actually means that this is about an entire corps. And y'all know something that's crazy? Y'all know something that's absolutely wild. Y'all know what I did today? I went and read the Army Techniques Procedures 7-100.2 North Korean Tactics. I read it today, and I can't say that I've read it extensively. It was more so of a quick read on particular segments that are important, but if y'all ever want to know, what does the Enforcer read for fun? It's these kinds of things, because they tell us so much about how our enemies fight us, or how they will try and engage enemy forces, and that was a very interesting thing to read. It's just so much. Look at this. North Korean fundamentals. It tells you all about the fundamentals of how the North Korean army operates, the kind of social influences that have dictated the way that they've changed their doctrine over the years into what it is now. Actions to counter U.S. forces inside of South Korea, all of that kind of stuff. And then they talk about functional tactics. But then there is the most important one for what we want to know today: North Korean force structure and formations, which is Chapter 3. Now, this is why this chapter is important. There is a certain kind of a way that a modern military is molded nowadays to be as efficient as possible on the battlefield. Generally, what you'll see is that every single kind of a unit, except for the army, the brigade, and the battalions, has been removed or has become almost an administrative sort of a level thing. There really is no actual leadership or command that comes from a corps or a regiment or a division. Those are more so just sort of administrative kinds of descriptors that are used for certain units, but there is no actual command value that comes from them. For example, with the People's Liberation Army in China, they have completely streamlined their military since the 2017 reforms to be composed of group armies, which are then made up of 12 combined not combined arms brigades, but they're made up of 12 brigades. 6 of those, I believe, are combined arms brigades. The other 6 are support. And then from there, those brigades can be broken up into, I believe it's around 10 battalions, and each of those battalions fills a specific role. And the battalion in the Chinese military is the basic fighting element of the People's Liberation Army. North Korea's, if we scroll down to Chapter 3, and we will, is the most complex looking sort of an organization that I've ever seen in the modern day, and it looks to have gone under no reforms whatsoever from what the United States Army intelligence is able to produce. And so let me move us on down here as much as we can. And I will tell you this, I actually read the entire ATP for China. Matthew can tell you that that's true because he would walk into my room and for like straight days I was just reading that thing, trying to learn everything I could about the Chinese. I'll have to do this over the North Koreans as well, but here we are. It's Chapter 3, North Korean force structure and formations. This is the craziest thing that I've ever seen. And let me go down past this and to actually explain to y'all what the hell the North Korean army is organized into, or the Korean People's Army is organized into. They talk about their command posts and stuff. That all will be read later so that we can get a better understanding of how they'll fight. The basic fighting element of North Korea, one of the larger basic fighting elements is the Corps. The Corps does not exist in the U.S. military anymore. Like yes, the Marine Corps is a thing, but the Corps, like the Marine Corps, is not an actual Corps-sized unit. It is far larger than an actual Corps, but nevertheless, they do hold over the name of the Corps. But beyond that, however, the Corps is the starting of their pretty much operations. It's crazy to see that kind of a thing because in the modern day, the Corps just doesn't exist, like on an actual practical level. Then the Corps is broken up into, and I kid you not, if you actually know what I'm talking about here, it is broken up into divisions. Divisions are freaking huge. Divisions are made up of several brigades. So to give y'all an idea here, this Corps is made up of about 3 to 4 divisions, and then the divisions are made up of multiple brigades. So they have a Corps commander that then gives their orders to the division commander, and then you're like, okay, so this must go straight down to the battalions, right? No. This thing goes to the brigade commanders. And let me get y'all down here to the brigades. So then they send this down to the brigade commanders, and I believe we are starting to look at least the divisions, but then you can see all the brigades that are inside the divisions here. I'm trying to get y'all down. Here we go, to the brigades. So then the orders are then issued to the brigades. And then the brigades, y'all know what they do? They don't issue them to a battalion like we would here in America or the Chinese would in their reformed army structure. No. They then issue them to the regiments. And then from the regiments, the orders are finally issued to battalions. And then the battalions are literally like this rigid, monogamous structure that is not flexible at all on the battlefield. The regiment is pretty much their version of battalion. And to just put this out there, the regiments are made up of multiple battalions. I mean, it's an insane amount of them. I think it's like, if I remember correctly, let me see here. An infantry regiment of the Korean People's Army is made up of 2,500 personnel. Just to put that out there, that's about the size of a Western brigade. And so this is their basic fighting element on the battlefield. This does not allow them any battlefield flexibility whatsoever, because instead of being able to issue orders very quickly down a streamlined chain of command from the army to the brigade and then to the battalions, they have to issue the orders to the Corps, well, from the army to the Corps, and then from the Corps to the division, and then from the division to the brigade, and and then from the brigade down to the regiment, and then from the regiment pretty much nowhere else, because the entire regiment almost operates as this one giant monogamous block. And so this is the most like horrific kind of streamlining that I've ever seen. This is the most unstreamlined kind of like organization that I've seen so far in the modern day from everything I've read. And this would lead me to believe that their actual fighting efficiency or fighting abilities is greatly hampered. I mean, we haven't even seen stuff like this from really anyone. I mean, even the Russians were reformed out of their older model by about 2008, and the older Soviet model looked a lot like this, but then the Russians even realized, as incompetent as they are back in 2008, that kind of a system was woefully inadequate for the kind of fast warfare that was occurring in the modern day and the kind of command flexibility that was needed. And so they reformed the army around 2008 to 2014 to work off of the battalion tactical group structure, which is very similar to the People's Liberation Army group army structure, and the United States' largely similar structure as well that works off of the brigade combat teams and then the battalions inside of those. This is just absolutely insane, and I'll have to, of course, read a lot more about how the Korean People's Army fights in the field, but this was horrendous. Like, this is like I cannot tell y'all enough about this. Just the absolute complexity of dealing with the Korean army would be insane. They're going to be slow. They're going to be so slow to react to anything on the battlefield, any kind of changes. They have the longest chain of command that I've ever seen. It's not streamlined at all. It will take forever to get orders up and down the chain. It will take forever to get everyone on the same page, and this just makes them a lot less flexible compared to the Ukrainians or the Russians. And also,
Don't worry, Kim Jong-un will step in. He'll save the day. He's a master strategist. He's a chef. He's a plumber. He's a dad. He's a family man. That is. He's an all-around guy. He's just a real stand-up guy. That fella, and he's going to step in here and fix the whole situation. Screw the chain of command. He's just going to issue the orders as a dictator.
Yeah, you know, his great leadership will guide them to death. And also, someone just said a good question. Outdoors Delmarva said, "Don't you think the North Koreans will fall under a Russian doctrine?" They will not. And I'll explain why. There is a massive language barrier in between the two that makes it impossible for the Russians to actually impart a great deal of knowledge onto these forces and then get them onto the battlefield fighting like a Russian battalion tactical group or a BTG. They just can't do that. So what they're doing right now, to explain what we're understanding at this moment, is that they're shipping North Koreans into Russia. They're issued Russian equipment, but then they're immediately put right back under the command of their Korean Corps commander, and then there's a couple of brigades that also have generals as well, and then that main corps general sends his orders down from his HQ staff down to the division commanders. The division commanders then send their orders down to the brigade commanders. The brigade commanders then send their orders down, believe it or not, to the regiment, and then the regiment sends their orders down to the battalion, which really don't matter because the regiment is the basic fighting element, and then they're screwed. Like, that's the best way to put it. So there is no way, like, the Russians may be giving them equipment, but there's no way to retrain all of these North Korean generals, all of their officers, and then all of their enlisted forces on a completely different doctrinal fighting style. They're already engaging Ukrainian forces in Kursk today, from what we've been told. And that means that they have had none of this training, none of this Russian doctrinal form implemented onto them. It is entirely a copy-paste of the North Korean strategies or doctrine, and they're just going with it. It's going to do terribly for them, and I don't even know how many of them will end up dying just due to the inefficiency of their fighting structure, but it's going to be pretty freaking bad. Nevertheless, some U.S. lawmakers, specifically, I believe it's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, has suggested direct military action by the United States of America in Ukraine after North Korea has gotten involved, and a lot of people are throwing in their thoughts on this topic. Considering that we're talking about the North Koreans and their actual fighting abilities right now, it seems pretty apt to talk about whether we should get involved or not. And it seems as though this is a very, very split topic right here. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking as well?
So this poll is surprisingly pretty even. So once again, the question is, some U.S. lawmakers suggest a direct military action by the United States in Ukraine after North Korean soldiers have gotten involved in the conflict. And what are your thoughts? So 35% said the U.S. will never directly step in, while 33% said the U.S. might step in directly eventually, and 24% said it depends on other factors. And on this one, I would personally say I don't really think the U.S. will ever step in, regardless of who's in charge. I think the U.S. will be forced to step in eventually to maybe a world war type situation, only if we're required to do so. We're never going to jump in and say, let's just preempt this thing and let's jump in and start fighting. I don't think that'll ever be the case. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't step in. That's just simply the reality of it. I don't think we ever will voluntarily, but we might be forced to eventually later on down the road. So I am with the 35%. I think we're going to take a back seat to this, even though we probably should do something right now. We're simply not going to do that for several different reasons, mainly because we're trying to avoid war at all costs, and that would go against the current doctrine. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I think we should take a step back and just watch them get burned. Like, I'll be entirely honest with y'all. After doing my quick little reading today on how they're just structured at all, they're not going to be competent. Like, at all. Like, on the battlefield, anywhere. Like, even just moving around behind the lines, it's going to be like the most complicated cluster F y'all have ever seen. And it's going to just be happening until they all end up getting killed or end up going home. That's going to be the truth of it. There is no reason to treat the North Koreans like this very scary, very dangerous force, because they're not. Like, everything about them on their doctrine is just terrible. It's 30 years old. It's behind the time. Well, it's dated by 30 years. It's not 30 years old. It's dated by 30 years. This kind of doctrine was brought about in like the 60s. Like, like, dude, I'm about to sound like that clown on Seinfeld, man. Like, you're talking about some old doctrine stuck in the 60s, man. You gotta move on, man. Like, it's terrible. It's terrible. I cannot believe these guys are living like they're in the 1800s, man. They're like, yes, we're going to call up the 17th Regiment. Like they're fighting in lines or something like that. It's like, the world has moved on. It's like, y'all got to get with it. Like the army, like that just shows how incompetent North Korea is. Because for them to not even pay attention to how everyone else has changed their doctrines massively, like over just the past 10 years, and to not implement a battalion, brigade, and army system like everyone else in the world has at this point, like they are truly like just stupid, like to a point I can't even comprehend it. Like that fat blubbernot guy is not coming up with anything over there for them to talk about their great genius. You would think that they have the genius enough to at least just copy American doctrinal fighting styles. Instead, they're just going to go with a stupid like freaking core system from the Soviet Union in like the 60s. Like that's crazy to me. Like just on that level alone, they're done for. They're cooked. Like think about it, man. Like when the Russians got invaded in Kursk, on the basic command level, the Russians were ordering around battalions, and that did make it, well, the brigades were ordering around battalion tactical groups, and that did make it easier to respond instead of this just backwards ass crap that the North Koreans are going to bring in, which is like an entire regiment made up of like 4 or 5 battalions, from what I could see, are going to get beat. And then instead of each battalion getting to react separately, the decision is made by a regimental commander who will just guide all of these battalions the same way. So they're very inflexible just on the tactical level on the battlefield for that reason. And not only that, their response times are going to be wildly slow, because for them to actually get any decisive plan or sort of course of action, the regiment guy has to send his stuff to the brigade, and then the brigade has to go to the division, and then the division has to go to the corps, and then the corps may have to go all the way up to the army level, although it's probably just capped at the corps, and then it has to go all the way back down, instead of just sending the battalion like orders up to the brigade, and then from the brigade to the army, and then straight back down, which is just so much more streamlined, and not only that, it's so much more flexible in a modern fighting environment. Like, I don't think there's even any point for us to get involved there. They are going to die in droves just because of their inefficient structure. Like, it's going to happen, and it's going to be the craziest thing to see. Y'all are going to see more North Koreans dying in a month here in Russia than y'all would even see back home in North Korea just starving. Like, I'm not even kidding. It's going to be horrendous.
Unfortunately, I think the bigger question to me is this, because I think you're operating under the assumption that the North Koreans are going to be under North Korean command. And I think some of them might be, because of course they are sending generals over there. But at the same time, I wonder who's going to be actually in charge here. Is it going to be the North Korean generals in charge of the North Korean troops? Or is it going to be maybe the generals take sort of a more passive role and the Russians are in charge of the command, and it's actually the Russian military command structure that's being followed? Because ultimately, whatever the answer to the question is, it doesn't negate the fact that North Korean soldiers are showing up in mass to Russia. And even if they are poorly equipped or inefficient, that still is a new manpower threat that Ukraine has to cope with, regardless of if they're well trained or not.
I would have to say that I don't. 1 second. Can you say that again? Because for some reason my entire mind slipped me. I'm about to start talking about working across the aisle here, but can you say that again?
I was saying basically that the thing to me is, are the North Koreans going to be under their own command? Like the generals that they're
Okay,
sending over
yeah.
there to Russia.
Now I remember where my brain collapsed as I started thinking about World War One. So the reason why I was thinking that is because this is a lot like what happened in World War One when America joined the war. Because back in the day when we joined the war in 1917, America was not ready to go to war. We actually had a meeting in the Department of War 3 days after war was declared by the United States against Imperial Germany to figure out when will we be ready for war? And it ended up, after everyone did the number crunching for like 48 straight hours without sleep, we found out that it would take us 28 months to be ready to fight the Germans, like after we declared war. And so we went, there's just no way. Like, we wouldn't even be over there in time for us to actually have a decisive impact. So we got to speed this up. So then we came to an agreement with the French specifically, and also with the British a little bit, that we would provide the manpower, they would provide the equipment. So while a lot of American soldiers were showing up over in France, in U.S. uniforms and with U.S. rifles, the French were providing literally everything else. They were providing the pack animals, like the horses. They were providing the artillery. They were providing even sometimes helmets. Like, you can actually see that with some U.S. forces later on in the war, if you ever find black and white pictures, that they're actually not wearing U.S. doughboy helmets. They're wearing Adrian helmets, because some of these soldiers were sent overseas without even being issued proper helmets because we weren't producing enough of them. So the French then had to supply them with helmets and other kinds of additional equipment, even sometimes things like gas masks, which also were not being produced by the United States in large enough numbers at that point. So back then, we were even not really ready to fight World War One, but we went over there and we were being almost entirely supplied by the French beyond everything but the bare essentials. But we were still under our own command because it was under the command of the American Expeditionary Forces under General Pershing. So while we were being supplied with everything by the French, and it kind of looked like we ended up being French for the most part, we still were under a completely separate American command that was issuing orders to the U.S. forces in conjunction with the French and the British, but still at the same time independent to itself. So that's what we think the North Koreans will be doing, because while they are being supplied by the Russians, that certainly does not mean that the North Koreans will not be in control of these forces. And considering that North Korean officers are present, it's very obvious to me that they are going to be structured like an expeditionary force. They're going to be supplied a lot by the Russians, but the actual command of these forces will be given to the North Koreans. Although that doesn't mean that the North Koreans just do whatever they want, wherever they want. They still will be coordinating with the Russians to figure out what the grand strategy is and how the North Koreans are going to be involved in that grand strategy, but it still will be done by the North Koreans from the top down, past the pretty much very highest levels in the Russian Ministry of Defense on the abstract strategy.
I got to say that I'm personally still a little bit undecided on that, because I think, in my personal theory, I think the reason why the North Koreans might be sending command, like leadership, like generals and things like that, is they might be sending them there to witness the war, so that way they can try to come back and have maybe some third-party military experience by observing the war happening in Ukraine right now. And maybe if there's a war that breaks out between North Korea and South Korea, the generals can come back and kind of have some practical knowledge of some sort to be able to fight a war. Now, obviously, that war would be much different. It's in a different environment. It's not in Ukraine. It's not in Europe. That would be quite different. But currently, the generals really don't have any military experience, real life experience at all in North Korea. So witnessing anything on the ground would probably be a bit of a feat for them. So maybe that's the reason why they're going there, is because the Russians will be in command, but the North Korean generals need to witness it.
Maybe, but at least the number of generals that we've heard of, around 3 of them, is really lining up. I mean, it's almost perfect to a corps kind of a structure, and as many generals that would be needed to run the brigades inside of a corps. So from what I would be able to tell and what I would be able to know, it does look a lot like it would be some sort of a corps level unit that's been sent as an expeditionary force, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more information that comes out that will lean more towards these are just bodies given to the Russians, or is this an actual completely separate expeditionary force that is being used by the North Koreans? force. Who really knows? Like, only time will tell, but I'm still largely in the camp that they probably are going to be operating exactly like an expeditionary force instead of a integrated Russian army unit.
It could be. I guess time will tell on this one, but nonetheless, like I was just sitting here thinking as well, like the fact that we're discussing North Koreans inside of Ukraine right now, if you really stop and think about that, that is nuts. Because I was thinking while I was thinking about all the deep analysis you were saying and stuff like that, I was thinking we're actually discussing North Korean soldiers in Europe right now fighting in a war that is not even theirs. That's just unbelievable when you really stop to think about it. We've gotten to this point where other countries are jumping into the situation. And when you really look back and take a step back, it's really quite dangerous that North Korea is getting involved with us. And it's also quite dangerous, like, for example, the United States, the most powerful country on the planet, is suggesting that maybe we should get directly military involved in that war, which Russia is participating in. And they actually started the war. I mean, it's a precarious situation all the way around.
Dude, it is just weird, though. Like, when you do think about that, man, North Korea, the hermit kingdom, known for never going outside of their country for any reason at all, is sending tens of thousands of soldiers into Eastern Europe right now. Like, that is literally, like, man, my mind would have exploded. My brain would have exploded if this was 4 years ago and me from the future would have come back and said, you're not going to believe this, man. There's going to be a major war in Eastern Europe. It's going to be the largest war seen since World War II. And, oh, by the way, there's going to be North Koreans in it in mass, like in like a couple of years after it starts. I'd be like, are you on meth, dude? I'd be like, this doesn't even
I would
make
have never
any
guessed
sense.
it ever.
No, this is the thing that you wouldn't even guess in a bingo card game. Like, it'd be like North Koreans in Eastern Europe. That's not even on the sheet, dude. You'd be like, what the hell, man? That's not even a thing. It's the weirdest thing, man. And also, you got to think, man, the North Koreans have no knowledge of the outside world. Like, even these expeditionary forces and the North Korean generals have a very limited grasp or a very ignorant grasp of the outside world. Imagine when they're going to run into FPV drones in large numbers in Kursk. Like, they're already starting to run into them right now. Imagine when, instead of just getting hit with a mass artillery barrage, what they're thinking it probably would be like, they're hit by precision artillery rounds hitting exactly on where they're standing. Think about that, man. Like, they've never even thought that these things are going to be seen on a massive scale. Or at least the rank and file have never seen this on a massive scale. Maybe North Korean generals know a little bit more about what they're going to be facing, but the actual Korean foot soldiers have no clue. This is all going to be new to them. Hell, even just seeing a MRAP or any kind of an armored car like that, it's going to be brand new. They've never seen that before.
They're going to get blindsided, that's for sure. They're going to find out real quick what real war looks like, and all the propaganda they've been sold on is bullshit. They're going to realize that really quickly, that their people have nothing like this. Like, they have stuff that is like, their capabilities, what they're used to, like the really low-end equipment, and they're going to realize, damn, like the Ukrainians are getting secondhand equipment from the United States, and it's already 10 times better than what we have, and that's not even the real modern stuff. That's just the hand-me-downs that they're getting from the United States, and they're going to realize, I think we've been fed crap. But the unfortunate part is, those North Koreans that are going to see that are probably not going to make it much longer. Once they get on the battlefield, they'll probably be taken out, and they won't even be able to take that knowledge back. Also, something else, Enforcer, I'm not sure if you heard this, but I heard the North Korean government is now cordoning off the families of the soldiers that are being sent to Russia to fight and also to go into Ukraine. They're cordoning off the families of those soldiers so that they can have no knowledge of the outside world whatsoever, and those families are being separated from the rest of the North Koreans, which was quite interesting.
I did hear that, but the news article that was put out about that was very ambiguous because it was saying most North Koreans don't even know this is happening. Like, we just have like the inside scoop on what's going on in North Korea, and it's like the whole thing about North Korea is that we don't have the inside scoop. So I did see that, but the reason why I never brought it up is because, they added in, most North Koreans don't know, like they're just going around polling people in North Korea, and I was like, I don't know if this is like a completely valid article or not.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, when I read it, I saw it from several different sources, actually. It sounded like it was legit to me, and it also sounds like something that Kim would do, because I'm not really sure how they would communicate back with their family members, because obviously they're being sent to Russia, and they probably don't have cell phones, because they probably don't even know what that is.
Obviously not.
Yeah, unless they're being like allowed like a prison call back to home from Russia or something like that. I'm not even sure how their family members would know what they're seeing inside of Russia, because they're not getting news from the outside, they're not getting phone calls, they're not getting the internet. So, I'm not really sure why they would do that, but it sounds like maybe a precaution they would take since they're such a hermit kingdom.
Well, you know what? The only way they're going to communicate back to their family in North Korea is through letters, and all of those letters are going to go through a censorship department that's going to censor almost everything in each letter.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, and even if they got a letter saying something like that, it's not. It's really not going to do them any good because the family members can't even really see what they're talking about.
Man, let me go show 1 second. Censored letter. Let me go show y'all a picture of this. This right here is what most North Korean letters are going to look like. It's just going to be black paint over some areas of the letter because they're like censored, censored. And then if they see anything that's questioning the party, dude, that's immediately knocked down on the sung button to the hostile class, straight to the gulag. That's what all of that's going to look like. But yeah, like they don't have phones. North Koreans obviously aren't going to learn how to use a phone, and they're not going to be allowed to have a phone. So they're going to be writing home literally in letters and sending them back to their families, and they'll all be censored if there's any kind of sensitive information in them at all. So
Man, they're getting kicked out the songbong for this one.
man, they're getting kicked out of that songbun. Also, by the way, a lot of y'all know North Korean generals and laugh at them because of the amount of medals that they have. Like, if you put these guys near a magnet, I think they'd truly get killed. Like, put these guys in an MRI, we're going to have absolute, like, tomato puree all around the room. Many of y'all will see these pictures, where they have medals literally all over their overcoat, and then even on their pant legs. And what's actually interesting about this, I'll explain this. The Songbun system, which is the caste system, passes down benefits and punishments for 3 generations. So this isn't the accomplishments of just this single general. This is the accomplishments of him, his father, and his grandfather, all represented on his uniform.
That's a very interesting system as well. What happened to like your individual responsibility? You got to bear the responsibility of your family as well. It's kind of a little bit interesting.
Yeah, you bear the heroisms of your family and also the tribulations of your family for 3 straight generations. So
So it's like if Unk goes out there and acts a little bit wild out there on the battlefield or something like that and gets disgraced, and then the sons has got to deal with Unk's fallout.
yeah, Unk's going to have his whole family suffering badly if he acts stupid.
That's a terrible system.
It is terrible. Like, it's absolutely stupid because it's like, is that guy you? It's like, no. It's like, why in the world are you being punished for what he did? It makes no sense. But beyond that, that is how it works. And it's just wild. It's crazy to see the amount of medals, though. Like, that is an insane amount of medals. Like, it's like someone ought to tell them at some point, like, by the way, y'all, like, there's like a certain way you're supposed to wear the medals on your uniform. I don't think that it includes putting them on a pant leg. And dude, imagine when they walk, man, like how much their weight's offset because of the medals on their pant leg. Like, it's not a lot, but that has to be annoying.
Yeah, it's got to be, man. That's a lot of weight.
Man, I'm telling you, and they don't have ribbons. Like, all of it has to be medals. They don't have ribbons. They don't have a ribbon rack or anything like that. Like, none of them have ribbons. They're all medals.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. It's saying also it's like the whole uniform at this point might as well just be made of metal. Like, just make the metals into the uniform because it's literally covering the whole thing.
Yeah, also, I like this guy right here in this picture. I respect him because he's wearing all of his clothes, and he's a general, by the way, but all of his clothes are like 5 sizes bigger than what he actually is. Like, the fit is for an obese man, but this man be starving. Like, it's like, what is up with, like, the clothes fitting in North Korea? And also, why in the world do they have officers' hats, which are so like, they are dumb looking? Because they look like those little hats that the Toads wear in, like, Mario. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain kind of, like, a flair that you can have to an officer's brim on the hat, but this is just too much. Like, they literally look like Toad, dude. Like, a Toad from Mario. Let me go pull him up. Right here.
John Person said, imagine what that sounds like in the dryer. Oh man, that probably like destroys a dryer. They don't have dryers, by the way. They're air drying that uniform right there. They're putting it outside on the rack or on the string.
But man, look at this right here. This is Toad, man. Look at that hat that he has on. That's a hat, by the way, apparently. But then look at this. That hat looks like Toad's, dude. Like, no joke. Like, it's just like they cut it halfway off and then called that the officer's cap.
Yeah, it looks pretty close. Like, I've never really thought about that comparison, but yeah, it kind of looks like Toad.
Man, when you sit there and talk to a North Korean general, like every other North Korean's like, all that stuff, and then when you talk to them, they're like, or something like that. You're like, what the hell? Like, they're all Toads. But anyways, moving on from that, because I had to make the comparison just in case any of you all have never seen that before. Now you will see it and not unsee it. But moving on from that, and before we get into the Middle East news and the Ukraine war news, we do have, well, we've already been in the Ukraine war news a little bit, so we'll actually carry on from there. We do have some interesting questions that have been thrown in tonight that we do want to get to. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our first one of the night, our first super chat is going to go to none other than Khan, who's a longtime channel legend and threw in one of the largest super chats of the night, a
Hey!
$100 donation. Thank you very
Dang!
much, Khan, for supporting our work as always, and we sincerely appreciate it very much. And Khan says, "Make Russia small again." He said, "I love Zelensky's t-shirt," and also saw, by the way, as well, Con, and it was very cool. He said, "This will make a lot of money if the LSA supported the mass production of such a Make Russia Small Again t-shirt. And what are your thoughts on this? And I would buy 10 LSA Make Russia Small Again t-shirts."
That is an interesting idea, actually. Like, I hadn't actually thought of that. Matthew and me have not talked merch, I think, in like a good month at this point or two. But if we were to do something like that, maybe, Matthew, we could make an entire line of merch ideas to do like that, like make Russia small again, or make China West Taiwan, or make Iran not Iran, like it's like make Iran Persia or something like that. Maybe we could make an entire line of shirts like that, because that would be within the channel's pro-American, pro-Western ideological kind of like a thing that we put out, and it would help to support the channel a good bit if we did make them. Although we never really make anything with the concept of like, oh, we're gonna make a fortune on it. That probably would end up being a pretty successful merch line if we did something like that. That would be pretty cool. We wouldn't put.
If y'all want that merch line, by the way, and the enforcer's okay with it, I can have that get that together pretty quick if y'all want that, because that is something that I could achieve if I really put my mind to it and worked around the clock for a few days to make that happen. There is a lot of work in the background that needs to be done to set that up, but we could make that happen. Like, that's, I
Matthew, you're breaking up
sure
badly.
yes or not for merch. I can make that happen. That'd be
He's breaking up bad, folks. And I see a lot of y'all saying, "Oh no, he's lagging." It's just his call.
uh,
It's bad, man.
oh,
It's really bad. Like, I can
weird.
hear you going, can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me now? Also, there is no lag on the
I
stream.
can hear you now.
Okay, there is no lag on the stream, folks. I want to make that clear. It's actually lag on the Discord's end, because I'm coming through just fine. OBS is connected perfectly. Discord's actually coming through 100% according to Discord at the moment. I don't know if it's something on Matthew's end with his Discord. He was having some issues with it before the stream. But Matthew, is your call fine now?
Yeah, my call's fine now. And also, Enforcer, usually it's coming from the host end, and my end says good too. So I don't think we can go off of that. It always says like 5 bars on strength on both of our sides, but I think it's something going on with Discord.
It probably is, to be entirely honest. But nevertheless, we did get the gist of what you were saying, Matthew, that whole time. Like, it was going, e, I was like, okay, well, we're getting a good idea. And
Man.
we can
Yeah, I was basically saying during that whole thing, I'm seeing a lot of people saying here that they were not able to hear it at all. And I was just basically saying this, that we've been looking to do a merch run for quite some time, and I could make that Make Russia Small Again shirt happen very quickly. If y'all wanted that to actually be a merch run, I could make that happen, because I can put some really good bit of time into it, and I can probably have that out probably in a few days, if that was something that the Enforcer wanted to do.
and we can do that. That is something that would be within our pro-Western kind of a ideology here on this channel, if we want to call it that. So we could do something like that, not just for Russia. We could do that for North Korea, China, and Iran as well. Really making sure to spread out the hit lists evenly amongst all of these countries, so that way we're on all of them, and therefore it's fair. So we could do something like that. That would be a pretty cool idea, and we may put that out there, Con. Another thing, by the way, that I have to bring up, speaking of monetization of something, or really like running a merchant line, I saw a load of comments come in on last night's stream, and a load of people were saying that there was 1 million ads running on last night's stream. Now, I do want to show y'all this, because I want to make this incredibly clear. We do not have the ads on that stream. Let me show this to y'all. We want to be as transparent as possible, so that way none of y'all are thinking, oh, they just started turning on the monetization. No, the monetization was off, but we ended up getting copyrighted, and I will give y'all a very quick kind of like a descriptor of what happened. So many of y'all will know that our new intro or at least one of our current intros that we're running right now, has a segment for Israel, Ukraine, the LSA, and then also the United States in it. And it seems as though someone has decided, well, not someone, the YouTube Content ID system and all of its magic has decided to Content ID the very rendition of the Armed Forces medley that I actually had composed from scratch that cost $1,500 just to get to this point, and now it's costed an additional $3,000 to get it to the actual part where it's going to be orchestrated here on the 14th of November. So I've had to dispute that, and it's incredibly aggravating because it says that it's owned by some other group, and so I went and looked at this group, and I listened to their track, and it's not at all similar to the one we have at all. Like, it's an actual live band that did it. Mine's a digital, mock-up of our final product that we're going to be having. So we are currently in the process of disputing that at the moment, but for now, the people who YouTube says owns the copyright to the literal, completely original work that we have made, and I paid exorbitantly to have, and, have made in the first place, is having ads run on it. So if you see ads on yesterday's stream or somehow tonight's stream, because it might happen again, I'm not entirely sure, that is because YouTube's Content ID system is coming through and saying that our original work that we have commissioned and had made for this channel that we own the rights to, we 100% own the rights to this rough draft version, because that was an agreement that was made, is being Content ID'd by YouTube, and they're claiming that someone else owns it. So we are going to be working on that in the background. We are in the process of disputing it. I'm sure the other company has no intentions of even bringing this up as an issue, considering it's not their own track. Their track is completely different than ours. It is an Armed Forces medley, but it's not the same one. So we are going to be getting that cleared up, and hopefully we'll be able to move on from there perfectly fine. But still, that was very aggravating, and I do have to apologize to everyone because we do promise that every single stream is ad-free and sponsor-free. The only caveat to that, though, is that if YouTube Content ID comes through and gets something in our stream, the person that they Content ID'd that for has the option to run ads on our stream and make money off of it, whether we wanted them to or not. So sorry about that, but I did want to explain what happened with that, so that way all of y'all weren't thinking we just turned on the ads last night and they're going to be running like that forever. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and thank you so much once again for the massive support, Con, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, in our next super chat here, the second one of the first segment goes to none other than Harvey the Drummer, who's also an LSA channel legend. And Harvey the Drummer throws in also a very generous $100 donation. And thank you very much, Harvey, for the second largest support of the night. He said, I'm still alive, LSA, and I've been watching the daily updates for many months. And Mississippi loves the Enforcer. And how many countries need to get involved before we have legit World War III? And stuff is getting out of hand, and I don't see any others reporting North Korea helping Russia. And LSA.
And long live the LSA. And huge thanks for the support, Harvey the Drummer. And it's good to hear that you're alive. It's great, because we've been actually wondering where some folks have been, and you're one of them, actually. But nevertheless, to answer your question here, it's not really how many countries get involved. It's really if all of the wars end up kind of going under a general theme. Because, for example, with World War II, there was actually a lot of separate wars that were going on. Italy invaded Ethiopia, and then Italy went to war with Britain, and then Germany invaded Poland, and then Britain and France came to the defense of Poland, but not really, psych. And then the Soviet Union invaded Poland to take over half of it, which wasn't really a part of the same war, but it was kind of all in the same time frame. And then the Germans invaded the Soviet Union, and then Britain and France and the United States all decided that they were going to be buddy-buddies and help each other out while they all fought against these separate wars that were happening simultaneously. It's not really that there has to be wars going on around the world. It's that there has to be two clear, distinct sides that end up forming that are fighting against each other. And while we are seeing the formation of that group right now in the Axis forces, which is the Russian Federation, Iran, and North Korea, we're not seeing that wars have kicked off in all of these areas that our side, the West, is having to collectively agree that we're all going to fight against simultaneously and attempt winning and view it largely as one large conflict. We're not really seeing that yet. The Middle East situation is entirely separate from the Ukraine war, and the Ukraine war and the Middle East war are pretty much entirely separate from the Korean war right now. They're not really unified like World War II was, with the multiple different wars that were going on in fronts that everyone ended up fighting in a unified front. So for that reason, I would have to say it's not really about the amount of countries that would have to get involved, because right now we really are at like the max amount of countries that could get involved. The entire northern hemisphere is involved in some war somewhere, somehow, some way, which is exactly how it was in World War II. Like, no one in South America and Africa was really involved in the war that much. And a lot of people are gonna be like, well, what do you mean? Like, there was like massive wars that were, well, massive battles that were fought in North Africa. But at that time, all of that was colonial ownings of European powers, so it still largely is just the northern hemisphere, and it spanned over into northern Africa. But beyond that, South America never got involved, and the Anzacs, of course, got involved. But beyond that, this literally is like World War III at this point, at least in everyone being involved. It's pretty much at the max. It's just that there is no united war against one side and the other at the moment. They're all separate, sporadic wars that are being fought for different reasons at this point and don't have a unified form. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least in my opinion. But once again, I do have to remind you that this is my opinion, and a lot of people are saying that World War III has technically begun, and this is even a scholarly debate with World War II, is when did World War II begin? Because some people say it began in 1936 and 1937, others say it began in 1939. And it's actually a pretty decent argument. And we could even argue right now that World War III has technically begun, especially in the future. Scholars could look back and say that World War III had already begun. But I would have to be in the camp that it has not, but we're getting closer to it at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can with my, own scholarly ideas about this, because I just don't think it's necessarily begun 100% yet. But still, thank you so much once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep this channel running. And so a massive thanks to you once again, Harvey the Drummer, for the incredible support, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving back into the news.
All right, and this one is going to go to Glock Glock, who's there, who's a channel legend as well, who puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Glock Glock, for that support. And they said, going on a trip to Colorado, and what do you guys know about the Durango to Silverton Historic Railroad? They have a rail trip with a stay at the 1880s Grand Imperial Hotel in Silverton. And what say you, Enforcer? LSA forever.
You had to do it. There's so many people, including Matt, that are like, no, don't do it. No, don't. But I will tell you, the Durango and Silverton is a historic narrow gauge railroad that runs the territory from Silverton to Durango. And Durango is further north. Actually, Durango is actually south of Silverton. I don't know why I thought that. But here's Durango. This is the start of the historic narrow gauge railway. And then it travels its way up from Durango through Trumbull and then on up to Silverton itself through the Rocky Mountains. And it's an incredibly interesting kind of a railroad, because it's famous, like in America, at least in the railroading sphere, because it's scenic, it's pretty, and not only that, it has a great fleet of vintage narrow gauge locomotives that run it. I believe at some point it was actually owned by the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, which has since abandoned this. Let me go check the Durango and Silverton. I'm very sure that this was Denver and Rio Grande territory at some point. But let me check. Let's see here. Yep, it was originally opened by the Denver and Rio Grande. This would have been their territory at the time, so it makes a lot of sense. So these are older Denver and Rio Grande locomotives that were then inherited by the Durango and Silverton, which is a heritage railway. But nevertheless, the scenery is amazing. Like the Rocky Mountains, no one can deny it's the most beautiful mountain range in the United States. It beats the Appalachians by a good bit, in my opinion, and I'm from the area around the Appalachians. It's just gorgeous. It's neat. And it certainly is worth a visit and an experience if you're into this sort of a thing. As far as the Grand Imperial Hotel in Silverton, I've never actually seen it, at all. So let me see if I can find it. So Silverton is where the train stops. Where is the station? Where in the hell is the station? San Juan, the county. So let me go look at that super chat and get the name of that.
San Juan.
So let's see here. It is the Grand Imperial Hotel. The Grand Imperial Hotel right here. That's actually pretty cool. the rooms are old. like this whole hotel is supposed to, well, it's been renovated a little bit, but it's supposed to give off that historic feel from the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th centuries. And it does that pretty well. I mean, it looks a lot like it would have back in the day. So that is actually pretty, oh my God. Dude, I'm glad they repainted the building at some point because that is
Jeez.
bad, man. That's horrendous right there.
That's
And
tough right there. Those color schemes is rough.
man, that was like the give me that psychedelic acid trip vibe kind of a paint job. It's like, you don't want that. But that is pretty cool. I would say that this certainly is worth the experience, without a doubt. This is something you'll be able to talk about for the rest of your life, and that's usually what vacations are about, is having someone to talk about for the rest of your life. And it's just neat. Like, what can I say? It is neat. So let me show you this. One last thing. This is one of the bridges that crosses over the rivers in this area, and you can see that they cross it on the Durango. And so isn't that neat? It's incredibly cool. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does address that incredibly well, Glock who's there, because you know that I'm a foamer at heart. And you know what? I'm just going to accept it. I am a foamer, but I hope that it does answer that well, because that's one of the railroads on my bucket list. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and have a fun time on your trip to Colorado as well, by the way. And so with that, we are now moving on into the rest of our news. And also, just to let you all know this, we are running a little overtime, so we will be speeding up the news by a little bit. But nevertheless, sources do say that Israel postponed its attack on Iran indefinitely due to a U.S. intel leak. Do you believe it? Do you not? What do you think, Matthew? And what is everyone else thinking?
All right, so we are hearing here that apparently Israel has indefinitely postponed its upcoming Iran attack. Believe it or not, they've allegedly postponed it due to the U.S. intel leak, which was quite detrimental and exposed Israeli plans. That just happened about a week ago, and do you believe it? Is Israel actually postponing it? So 32% said no, it's an Israeli psyop on Iran to get them off kilter, while 28% said yes, Israel will wait for new plans before attacking, and 25% said Israel's going to wait until after the election. And I'm actually with the 25%. I'm beginning to think that they're going to wait until after the election, and maybe they're stalling for time and using the intel leak as basically a cause to actually delay the attack to make it look like it's a little bit more believable, instead of making it pretty obvious that they're waiting until after the election. I think they're going to wait and see what's going to happen with that and the change of power. And obviously, we don't get political, so please don't get political in the live chat. But I think it's not really a psyop on Iran, and they're probably not waiting for new plans either, because I'm sure that Israel already had contingency plans in place, and they're probably going to put one of those into place as a replacement. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, it probably isn't Israeli psyop, because everything that we've been hearing up till this point has been that they're going to attack, and they will attack, and Iran seems to be in the belief that they will, and then we hear this today. I would have to say it's largely seeming to be a psyop. But moving on from that and into the rest of the news we did get today, also, by the way, Matthew, I'm going to have to be starting to shoot through this quickly, so we can't linger on every single topic like we want to. But moving on from that, we did get to hear massive news today that Belarus and Turkey have had their BRICS access shelved, or really put onto a quote-unquote waiting room. You can see the massive article here where it explains that Lukashenko was really pissed off by that, because Belarus got clowned on. After being Russia's minion for such a long time, they didn't even get any respect. Oh man, I'm telling you. But moving on from that into the Russian Federation, we did also get to hear that apparently Putin is ready to consider peace with Ukraine, but that doesn't really mean much, of course, because, you know, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of stupid caveat or a notion to it, but we can see him saying it right here. Pretty interesting statement. We don't believe it's real, but we'll wait and see if they ever have a peace proposal. I'm sure it'll be full of stupid demands. But moving on from that and down to the Middle East, we did get to hear that Qatari Airways canceled all their flights in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, stating unstable tensions in the region. We were also able to see that a proxy drone fired from a proxy inside of Western Iraq actually did crash in the Dead Sea today, which we can see right here. Yeah! And so that's the end of that clip. Very interesting to see. And moving on from that, we were also able to see that the Turkish air forces have begun to strike Kurdish targets within the area of northern Iraq and northern Syria as of just a short while ago. We can actually see the Turks here loading up their bombs onto their aircraft and then attacking what the United States likes to call one of our allies. The United States has made no statements about the Turkish attacks on Kurdish forces that the United States is supporting right now in northern Syria and Iraq. But nevertheless, Turkey is doing Turkey things as usual. But we can see the Turkish Air Force here making a very big production out of this.
Hey, that looks like our plane.
It does, doesn't it? And we see them dropping bombs that look like air bombs.
What do you know? We gave them some more planes, and now they're going haywire.
And there they are hitting the Kurds. I mean, it's crazy when you sit there and think that the Turks will obliterate our forces that we support in the area, and then we won't really come up and say anything about it. It's ridiculous to me, and I feel like this is a big conflict in interest here in between what we're doing and what Turkey wants to do. We see them continuing to hit more Kurdish forces in the area, and we are going to be cutting the video a little short because it is kind of like a wash, rinse, and repeat clip showing them just hitting multiple Kurdish forces, but nevertheless, once again showing that Turkey is doing the usual things that Turkey does. Meanwhile, in Iran, we did hear that Iran gave an ultimatum today that if Israel attacked them in any way, shape, or form, they were going to start a large-scale war against the state of Israel for quite some time. We are not knowing if the Israelis are going to attack them soon or at all at this point, and so we'll be waiting to see what happens in that area. Meanwhile, moving on to the Ukraine, we did get to hear some air defense was active over Kyiv last night as drones penetrated the air defense perimeter, and we were able to see one of the Shaheeds shot down right there. Holy moly! And that's the end of that clip, but moving on from that and into our location unknowns, we were also able to see the test flight of a brand new Ukrainian drone with a thermal imaging camera called the Kerbos 256. Look at them go. Aw, man, look at that foamer. Whoa.
Oh man, the Russians are getting knocked out faster than my subs. Oh man.
Aw, man, I don't even have a brain good enough to come up with content, so what I'm going to do is film a 5-hour road trip and be incredibly standoffish to the guests I have in my automobile. Aw, man. With these it's Dr. Pepper. It's Dr. Pepper. Like, oh, bro, chill. Like, dude, you asked them to be in your car. Why are you treating them like they're hostile? What the hell? Aw,
It's
man.
just, you know, he's a little neurodivergent, you know what I mean?
Aw, man. His brain goes two ways, stupid and stupider. Aw, man.
He has no passion, he has no vision, he has no damn mindset.
And he really doesn't, man. It's like, damn. It's like, come on, man. Get together. And then he sat there and heard Matthew, he's so creep, and I'm so brat. And he went, you know what? That's great. I'm going to use that myself. The enforcer is so creep. It's like, dude, please just come up with something original. I beg of you. But also, we got to see a brand new Russian Cope cage. They're really getting like fancy with these things at this point. I don't even know how to describe this one, but it is a treat to see. They even put a damn lawn chair on the back of the turret and mounted a machine gun on top of the cage. Like, this is getting advanced. We are seeing advanced warfare here, folks. And they just keep spinning the turret as well, just to show it off, you know.
Yo, this is so brat.
Whoa. What's happening in Romania?
And then you have the alternative, which is, whoa, look at that boiler.
Uh-huh. Which way, Western, man? Aw, man, I can't even think. Aw, man, or, whoa, look at that boiler. It's like, which way, man? Like, pick it.
Whoa, look at that boiler. Out there looking like a toiler. I'm a spoiler.
Whoa, look at that boiler on that foiler. Looking like a spoiler. Do something like that.
You know, this channel's called Russian Context. I never really like getting any Russian context, but it's usually like brain rot.
Oh. Well, now they're testing the machine gun. It's a miracle in Russia that machine guns even work, so they have to show it off just to remind everyone that machine guns sometimes do work. Whoa. Look at that broiler over there near that coiler, near that oiler. And I guess that's a little bit of a foiler, but I don't want to give you a spoiler because I'm sitting here with my oiler. And now you see him climbing down out of the goofy cope cage. We see this guy now taking the next spot. Blade, we don't need to fight the war. Just get up there and play around with a machine gun, Blade.
Oh man, out there with the boiler, like a toiler. He's a pot boiler with some recoiler from the steam boiler. Let's see, from the let's see here. Damn, I lost my train of thought.
Watch that plane land over there. Look at that boiler when it deploys its spoiler, looking all like a I don't even know, like man. There's not a lot that rhymes with boiler, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I pulled up the rhyme book real quick. That's where I was cheating from, and then I totally ran out of them.
I ran out of words. Like, I was like, what the hell rhymes with boiler? But anyways, the Russian casualty report was great today.
Oh wow, 4 Bobcats, man. But also, tell us about those other losses. It looks like they lost a whole fleet of UAVs today. But let's hear it.
Man, the drone losses were the 4th highest day of losses, according to Mestiza, the keeper of the books. And of 1,240 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 25 APCs, 69 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 45 artillery pieces, 108 drones, 2 MLRSs, and 4 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, it was a pretty good day, and we love to see it, and we love to know that the Russians are continuing to not have good times out there in Ukraine. Meanwhile, we also got to see a Stritzwagen 122 with Contact 1 ERA on the side up there in the northern area of Luhansk. Moving a little bit further on down and towards the area of Touretsk, we got to see the Ukrainians repelling an assault near Touretsk. And correction, these are actually the Poles. And we love the Poles.
No.
I can't tell if there's music in the background or not yet, but we'll wait and see. Okay, now that answered my question, we will have to mute this, but we can see our Polish volunteer here calling in on the radio. And we see them wandering through the trenches in Touretsk.
Yo, they're from the trenches.
Aw, man. Big shout out to the guys who grew up on the streets, because I'm not one of them. Like, aw, man.
Yo, did you hear about that rapper beef? I know we're covering like a war where people are actually like putting their lives on the line to save their country, but have you heard about that rapper beef though?
Have you heard about little crap getting in a fight with the big like a big Bulin or something? Like, whoa, bro. Like, that's crazy, man. I can't even think of like rapper names, man, honestly. Like, I was like, what the hell is like a rapper name? Just like little something or big something. Like, that's what, like all rapper names, honestly.
Whoa, have you heard about Lil Payback getting even with Little Sean? Oh man.
Oh man, it was for real.
Man.
And by the way, I'm totally a big fan of Ukraine. I just want to let y'all know that. But getting back to talking about rappers, I mean, like, that fight in St. Louis, oh my goodness, that was crazy. Like, that's really what the world is about these days. Aw, man. Also, someone say, hey, don't diss the streets. I'm not dissing the streets. Who dissed the streets? I didn't diss the streets. You know, and what's crazy, man, is that you'll listen to folks like him go, "Aw, man, Minneapolis is hard. If you grew up here, you're hard." And then it looks like paradise compared to Montgomery, where we're from. And then Montgomery was literally like the Thunderdome or Mad Max, like Survive If You Can. And it's like, we thought that was like decent. Like, it's like we thought that was decent when we were growing up.
Vin DeGros said, I guess Hot Dog Man's rapper name would be Lil Dicky.
Oh my lord.
I think there actually is a guy with that name, by the way, like for real, like in real life. There is actually a guy that uses that name. There's actually like a real one.
Aw, man. Hot Dog Man's rap name would be Lil Peeper. Like, or something like that. Oh, man. Also, by the way, I also want to clarify this as well. I don't think it's like a good thing, like, to be proud of coming from a not so great place and then say like you're hard or something like that, and people are only on your level if they were from as bad a place. Like, I'm not really one of those people. I generally like think it's better to live in a nice place than like be proud of coming from like a war-torn city nearly, you know, like that's just my take, at least. Like, I don't know, maybe other people think differently. But I'm not like sitting here like, we're from Montgomery, we're really hard, and if you're not from Montgomery, you ain't on our level. Like, it was a rough place. I'm happy that we're out.
Wait, we got someone here. We got someone in the chat that can actually vouch for us. Because nobody is usually from Montgomery. It looks like a fellow said, I moved from Montgomery. It's a war zone. Thank you. Because a lot of people really don't believe us on that. Because a lot of people aren't from Montgomery, Alabama. Because it's really not a place you really want to live. Or at least most people don't want to live. Because it is like a war zone. The place is dangerous as hell. We lived there for ages. That place is awful, like probably the worst place in the country, in my opinion. It's a really awful place to live. Quality of life sucks. And if you get stationed there, like if you're in the Air Force or something, it's known as a really bad place. Like, it's just not a place you want to get stationed at. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Air Force stuff there, so a lot of people get stationed in Montgomery, but it really sucks.
Yeah, the Air War College. I feel sorry for those people who have to go to the Air War College, because, you know, they're like, what kind of place is this? It's like, it's Lower Alabama. It's not, like, it's like, it's a mixed bag, usually pretty bad, though. It's just different levels of bad. But beyond that, let's see. Here, I'm seeing some people. So is Memphis. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. I've never heard anything good about Memphis these days. Also, by the way, Matthew, I know a real rap name for Hot Dog Man is Lil Glizzy.
Oh, Glizzy. Man, they call him the Glizzy Gobbler.
Dude, he's going to come up with another AI image of himself that makes him look so much more heroic and majestic than ever before. A real Kim Il-sung kind of a mindset there with that kind of a thing going on. But moving on from that and a little bit further down the line, we unfortunately see today that a CV-90 did hit a mine today. It appears that the crew did survive and was able to bail, but it also seems as though the vehicle was, unfortunately, knocked out. With that, that's the end of that clip right there, and moving on from that and a little bit further on down the line to Selodove, we did get to see a Ukrainian APC from the Karadog unit getting shot at by the Russians as they drove through the town. You actually hear some of it right there. Oh, Doctor S. Puchman said, y'all know about Chisholm? Oh my God.
Yeah, we know about
Chisholm. Oh my God.
We had to drive through Chisholm a few different times here and there and stuff like that. It was one of the rougher parts of town.
Dude, that just brings me back to living in that hellhole. Man, I remember Chisholm was the butt of jokes. And we see the Ukrainians just still gassing it through this part of Selodove. And when you hear the shells just flying around in the armored car as they keep going. We hear their machine gun opening up on top of the armored car. And that's the end of the clip. But still, very interesting to see. And once again, showing us the heavy fighting going on in Selodove. Moving on from that, and a little bit further on into the Zaporizhia area, we also got to see a MiG-29 in action, dropping some hammers. And we also got to hear some Sabaton, which is heavily copyrighted, so we have to mute that. But there goes the MiG. Also, man, there's no way that someone is here from the homeland, you know, the hometown.
Someone must know where we've lived before, and they're saying that to, like, get us to confirm it or something like that. That's no, like, secret, by the way. Like, everybody knows. We've already said, like, we're from there.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's crazy, though, if you really are from there, because we are from there. And just in case y'all are wondering, it's Wetumpka, Alabama. That's actually where we were, like, that's kind of like our hometown. We were born in Montgomery. We lived in Montgomery until we were like, I think 7, and then we moved to Wetumpka because our parents didn't want us to get shivved in kindergarten on day 1 of school. So then we moved to Wetumpka so that way we wouldn't get shivved. We would just get beat up. Like, I'm just kidding though. I never got beat up in school. But still beyond that, that is where we're actually from. And then we moved up here to Birmingham. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see the Australians in the area of Zaporizhia defending their trench works.
Gonna skin you!
A very good beginning to any clip.
Oh,
Single fire. Yeah, Rog.
and over here we can see the stingray. You don't need to be scared of him. The wild one.
Oh, we got a bug over here.
There it is.
And now they're trying to shoot down a drone.
Fucking cunt.
All right. Oh.
Missed it. Relax.
Aim better next time.
Hey, let's go.
They seem to be having a lot of fun, actually, but still, great to see the Australian volunteers out there fighting around the Revoltne area. And with that, it is time for us to get up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 974 of the war.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці.
Finally, a long-lasting speech, a good speech.
Lasting coercive speech. Come on, please, a little bit of speech. What happened to his make Russia small again shirt? It disappeared, блядь.
And it is time for us to get to the real speech. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Сьогодні працює наша кримська платформа, її парламентський вимір. Вдячний Руслану Стефанчуку та всім, хто залучений за організацію роботи. Більше 70 делегацій-учасниць – це хороше, широке представництво. Цього року платформа працює у Латвії. І сьогодні я звертався до учасників саміту, закликав підтримати план перемоги. Знаю, що пункти плану достатньо глибоко і детально обговорювались, і важливо, щоб ми працювали з нашими партнерами не тільки на найвищому політичному рівні заради виконання плану, але й на всіх політичних та суспільних рівнях. Дуже важливо бути об'єднаними, максимально зрозумілими світові у наших мотивах, у наших потребах, у нашій можливості спрямувати цю війну курсом до справедливого завершення. Також окремо я хочу відзначити, що сьогодні на Кримській платформі багато працювали і щодо пунктів нашої формули миру, зокрема пункт про територіальну цілісність та виконання статуту ООН. Сьогодні у День Об'єднаних Націй це важливо, що світ не забуває про цілі та принципи статуту ООН, про мету створення цієї організації, хоч навіть деякі її функціонери віддають перевагу спокусам вказань, а не змісту статуту ООН. Все ж наш світ побудований таким чином, що права націй та норми міжнародного права мають і матимуть значення. Дякую усім, хто допомагає у цьому Україні. Сьогодні ж взяв участь у роботі президії Конгресу місцевих та регіональних влад, закликав так само працювати з планом перемоги на рівні громад, як ми працюємо на рівні всієї держави. Зв'язки між регіонами, між громадами, між містами принципово важливі для того, щоб суспільства інших країн відчували, що саме може Україна і як саме ми можемо наблизити мир. Всі разом. Ще одне. Сьогодні я провів засідання Ставки. На ньому, як і завжди, було багато різних питань. Я хочу зараз зупинитись на особливому дорученні членам Ставки та іншим нашим посадовим особам. Зараз Україні треба наповнити внутрішній план посилення. Такий план, який разом з планом перемоги забезпечить для України правильні відповіді на всі виклики цього і наступного року. План перемоги спрямований на партнерів, на їхню визначеність, яким є місце України в архітектурі безпеки. Чи готові вони, щоб Україна перемогла? Чи хочуть партнери бачити післявоєнну систему безпеки дійсно надійною? План перемоги, якщо буде виконаний партнерами, дасть всі відповіді. І зрозуміло, що є внутрішня частина роботи, позиції на фронті і в тилу, те, що потребує посилення, питання справедливості в Україні, яке стоїть надзвичайно гостро, наша економіка, наші робочі місця, наш розвиток критично необхідних Україні галузей, захист від російської дезінформації, соціальний захист людей. Багато напрямів потребують чітких відповідей. Які кроки ми робимо та хто відповідальний за реалізацію конкретних кроків. Цей внутрішній план посилення гарантуватиме Україні також і єдність Коли працюєш заради держави, відчуваєш, що ти з державою, з мільйонами таких же людей, які хочуть, щоб Україна перемогла. І так має бути. Я дякую всім, хто з Україною. Слава всім нашим людям. Слава Україні!
And the Ram Slava.
Героям слава.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that is going to be moving us on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And ooh, buddy, is it always a fun segment. We absolutely love to get to talk to each and every one of y'all. It is one of the times that we look forward to the most every single night. And of course, to start this off, I saw a good question. It was an abstract question, one that I feel I would be able to answer quite well. And it's from someone who appears to be questioning the motives of the West, possibly even a traitor or a political dissident, a criminal of the state. I'm just kidding, by the way. This is a good question, though. James R. said, how is Ukraine joining NATO in America's interests? And that is a very good question. Some people would be offended by that. I'll be honest with you, I'm not, because it is a good question, and it's really the basis of why we're here. And why in the world do we say on this channel, saying that we're a pro-American, pro-Western channel, that Ukraine is worth supporting and eventually trying to get into NATO, although that won't be immediate. The answer is that the Russian Federation is an incredibly dangerous country that is inherently against Western interests. If you ever look at any of their actions over the past 10 to 15 years, they have been entirely against the United States of America and the sphere that we have built over decades at this point, really the past 70 years. The Russian Federation sees this as an affront to them because they're never going to join our sphere and they're never going to align with our interests, although we have invited them to join NATO in the past, and we've even invited them, and when I say join NATO in the past, I mean after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And we have even tried to invite them into economic partnerships with the West, some of the largest ones being the major pipelines that have passed through the Baltic, which are the Nord Stream pipelines. We have tried to get them involved, but the Russians do not want to get involved with us, and they want to work to the detriment of the West and the Western world. This means that whenever we talk about dealing with the Russians, we're not trying to work on a position of friendship, because that would be naive. They do not want to be friends with us. They openly make it quite clear that they view us as an adversary, and they are openly unfriendly to the West whenever it actually comes down to it. So for this reason, they are a rival or an enemy for the large part of the United States and the collective West as a whole. And for this reason, we have to go on a stance that anything that we're doing in this area has to be to Russia's disadvantage. Supporting Ukraine is inherently a disadvantage for them. If we are to support Ukraine and eventually get them into NATO, even with the current condition that we're seeing right now, we have a second attack vector to Moscow, which in a strategic war largely paralyzes their abilities to conduct a proper defense. If Ukraine was a neutral country, that means that the entirety of the war would actually be fought along the borders of Belarus in the Baltics and inside the Russian Federation as well in the Baltics. Now, pre-war, Finland was not a part of NATO, so that entire area didn't exist. But now it does. So once again, we are putting St. Petersburg at threat with two different offensive axes. So Russia there would pretty much be overwhelmed, and they would be defeated. St. Petersburg will most likely be captured by NATO forces rather rapidly, or it would be a pretty horrendous siege that would occur, but they would still end up losing eventually, completely severing them from their most major port in the Russian Federation currently. Another big thing about getting Ukraine into NATO that would be in American interest is the economic opportunities that exist. Ukraine is not economically prosperous as it is. While their economy is doing okay, it's not amazing. But the thing is that once a country joins the Western sphere, we have a very good ability at rapidly growing their economy, which is not only beneficial to them, it's beneficial to us because it's an additional monetization base that the United States is able to work off of and grow our own GDP with through trade. That is an incredibly beneficial thing. So for economic and strategic reasoning, based off of the logic that I've laid out already with the Russians being an adversary and that not changing anytime soon, this is definitely within American and Western interests to support Ukraine and eventually try and get them into NATO for all of the aforementioned reasons. And so I hope that that does answer that question well. It's a very good question, actually. Why in the world is it in America's interest? And I hope if anyone's ever been able to explain that properly and really lay it out without getting into some sort of a like an emotional appeal, I hope that did it. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into the rest of the questions that we have. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving into our final question segment of the night, we have no more polls to address, and we're fresh out of those. So we're moving right back into our super chat questions, and this one is going to go to Old Warrior, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that support. He said, Madhyar will feast on the new kids. And he said when he means the new kids, he means the soldiers, by the way. I'll make that perfectly clear.
Oh, you will. Not the kids, but the North Koreans. But
Not
the North
kids,
Koreans,
not the kids.
not the kids. No Diddy. But beyond that, the North Koreans will be obliterated. Like it's going to be so bad. It's hard to even put it into words. Like every time I start trying to explain that, it's like a 5-hour thing to explain how badly it would go. Like to just explain how they will be integrated even onto the front. It's going to go so badly for them. Madhyar is going to eat these people for lunch, and everyone else is too. And then the North Koreans are going to be going, oh, it's oh man, I wish I could find y'all this clip. It was like, due to evil American imperialist maneuvers along with South Korea, our country is now starving. It was like something that they put out in the Great Famine. I hope I can find that really quickly.
Oh, that famine, the Great Famine. You should never call a famine great. You should call it the Big Bad Famine or something, but not the Great Famine.
For the famine. I'm trying to find this really quickly, man. Due to American imperialist maneuvers. It was like the craziest like accent I had ever heard. Dang it, man. They don't have it easy to find. I hate this, man. I hate this. I can never find crap when I need to. But it was so funny, man. They blamed us for the famine that happened. They're going to be blaming us for the absolute ass beating they're going to be getting in Kursk. Like, they're going to be going, due to evil American imperialist maneuvers just against North Korea, a large amount of our soldiers has been killed in Suja, or something like that. It's going to be
You
the
gotta say
funniest.
North Korea.
Yeah, it's like, oh, no. Man, it's going to be the funniest thing ever, though. I will tell you all that. And I promise you, it's not going to go well for him. It's just not. And so I thank you so much for the support, Old Warrior. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And I thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because you help us to be able to keep this stream ad-free and sponsor-free. And we've been doing that for years now, in a very long time. And you've been around for a very long-lasting time and helping to support this channel incredibly well. And I got to thank you so much for always being here, always enjoying this channel, and supporting it and helping it to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Joe Little, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Joe Little, for that very generous support. He said, have the Enforcers ever watched Red Dawn, 1984, the movie, and thoughts? And yes, I have seen that movie, Joe. It was a very good movie, a classic that I'm sure a lot of people have probably seen. This is a long-lasting classic. But thank you very much, Joe. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would say yes, I have seen that movie. Who hasn't seen that movie in America? It's a 1980s classic. Like, there's no other movie that really, like, emphasizes the mindset of the 80s, at least in that kind of perspective, except for Red Dawn. Red Dawn, the original one, was amazing. The new Red Dawn with Chris Hemsworth in it sucked terribly. I hated that one. I thought it was so dumb. It was just stupid. Like, North Korea invaded America, like that would ever be possible. Like, the reality, well, let me tell you all this. This is something that a lot of people do know. It's like an open secret about the modern Red Dawn movie. Yeah, here we go. This Red Dawn, with Chris Hemsworth in it, and also the guy who played Peter from the Hunger Games. This was supposed to be the Chinese invading America. Let me see if I can even get y'all a picture here of the actual movie set. Because what they did is that they actually had the flags of China on the movie set. And so what they did later is that they just airbrushed over the flags and they put North Korean flags up in replacement. And I cannot find any pictures of this at all. Hang on. Oh my God. Oh my God, you can actually find it. Yeah, okay, so this was the set. This is an actual picture from the set. That right down there is not the Korean People's Army symbol. That is the People's Liberation Army symbol. And that was supposed to be the original country that invaded America, was supposed to be China in the movie. But then because they knew that this wouldn't sell in the Chinese box office, they went and airbrushed everything over to be North Korean. So then they put the Korean Workers' Party symbol inside of the star, which is the, I think it's the sickle, the paintbrush, and I think a hammer. And then they made it into a North Korean police station. But yeah, this was legitimately crazy what they did with this movie. It flopped in America. It flopped overseas as well. No one liked it at all. It was just a terrible movie. But the one from 1984 was legit. Like, the build up, the actual plot, it was actually realistic. Like, it was something that you could say it's a bit of a stretch, but it's believable because it made sense. Like, if y'all don't know, because, like, to me, like, a movie like this, it has to make sense. What happened in this alternate timeline is that Mexico actually was taken over by the Soviet Union. Well, not really taken over, but they had a government overthrow conducted by the KGB as well as the Soviet Union as a whole, and they ended up turning Mexico communist, and they were able to use Mexico along with internal strife in America to build up an invasion force along the southern U.S. border, and then to launch a ground invasion into the southern United States and then punch northwards through the Midwest. It was actually a believable kind of a hypothetical war story. It just wasn't like, you know, like North Korea somehow flew all the way across the Pacific and started dropping paratroopers off in Washington State. Like, that made no sense at all as a plot. Like, it was stupid. This one made a lot of sense, and not only that, the actual movie itself was really good, and the kind of plot and the story it was sending, it was just great all around. I thought it was a wonderful movie. I absolutely loved it. And let me see. Oh yeah. Here we go. You can actually see like how they like mapped out the war and how it went at the time, and you can actually see the invasion that they made through Mexico and then also through Alaska as well. And the one through Alaska isn't really that realistic. It just logistically you can't really support an invasion and invading force in that area that well. But at least the one coming through Mexico, that was pretty plausible. You know, if anything would be plausible. But still, I was like, that's pretty freaking good. And then another thing is that the Chinese actually joined our side, and then they got nuked in this hypothetical scenario. And it ended up like having China's population because they were just slaughtering the Russians to that point, just with really overwhelming numbers. So that was a pretty cool movie. Like, I thought it was great. And I just loved the thing. I can't say that enough. Like, the whole thing was wonderful. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. Also, by the way, oh my lord, I forgot this one. This was really 80s of the movie. So while the movie was being made, there was this whole war going on in Afghanistan that we were not involved in, but the Soviet Union was involved in. And at the time, America was actually very sympathetic to the group that was fighting against the Russians, which was called the Mujahideen, which would later evolve into becoming the Taliban. And so in the movie, when you saw the like characters, let me go pull them up. Red Dawn, 1984. Let me show you all a picture of the characters, because when you see them at the beginning of the movie versus when you see them at the end, here we go. This is a good example. So at the beginning of the movie, they look like, you know, tried and true Americans from the 80s. Like, there's no denying that. By the end of the movies, they looked completely different. And the reason why they looked like this at the end of the movie is because they were trying to make a direct parallel to the Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan in the 80s, who usually looked like this whenever anyone would see them in press pictures here in America. And so that was the kind of message that was trying to be sent a little bit by Red Dawn, is that we would resist and fight back against the Soviets with such determination, grit, and will, just like the Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan were fighting against the Soviets at the exact same time in real life when the movie was being made. So it was a very interesting parallel that they made with that at the time, and it's actually something that's been talked about by the director and the actual movie like production staff, is that this was supposed to be like a direct allegory to the Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan. So did you know that, Matthew?
No, I definitely did not know that. That's news to
Yeah, and also another thing, let me see if I... Oh, you just cut out, man. I'm sorry, I overtalked you there. But another cool thing about Red Dawn 1984 is the vehicles. To show you all this, because all of the vehicles that they made were actually made off of Western vehicles, and they had to like make cardboard mock-ups or something along those lines to make them work. Like this one right here. Like, oh... It's terrible. Like, you can tell, like, the caption says it perfectly. You can tell that this is an M41 Walker Bulldog, and they chopped everything off the top, and they tried to make it look like a T-72. They did a good job, though. There was no T-72s in the West at this point when they made this thing, so this was actually a pretty good mock-up of a T-72. They also made a Shilka completely out of cardboard and a BRDM-2 back there, which looks really jank if you know what a real BRDM-2 looks like. But beyond that, I mean, this was great stuff for the 80s. Like, there was no actual examples. They were eyeballing all of this, and they did so well in the props department. And then they also have this cool picture here where the Soviet extras were standing in front of a McDonald's sign with a BMP mock-up kind of a thing. Like, I just thought the movie's like prop work was great, like with the vehicles. It was incredible, honestly.
Interesting, interesting. And also, by the way, let's see here. Also, by the way, I've seen some people talk about the interruption. There's some significant lag going on with our Discord, by the way. So it's not us interrupting each other, if that's what some people are thinking. It's just simply really bad lag on Discord. So please bear with us, folks, because trust me, I would love to eliminate the lag, but sadly, it's not an internet problem now. It seems to be turning into a Discord problem. So we'll have to work on fixing that.
Yes, we will, and we're still trying on that in the background. But still, with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Thank you so much for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that gives you my 2 cents on Red Dawn and all the kind of the cool facts about it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also Andrew Tight said, "Are you two brothers or friends?" No, we're brothers. That's why we sound so familiar,
Yeah.
and also that's why we sound so similar. But anyways, moving on here to our next question, we have one from Melinda Grifford Vaughn, who's a channel legend, and puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Melinda, for that support. And she said, "Thanks for providing the LSA with current world news." And my question is, how will the mass of antiquated North Korean army affect Ukrainian war? And North Koreans are fodder, but they still tie up valuable Ukrainian forces and weapons.
I think it's not really going to change it much, at least in the numbers they're showing up right now. But if it start to be present in much larger numbers, it will start to possibly overwhelm the Ukrainians in time. But due to the massive lack of equipment that they have, the complete alienation to foreign doctrine and modern doctrinal styles will serve them a major hindrance, and it will most likely lead to a great increase in casualties. Also, their complete unfamiliarity with modern equipment will also be a major problem for them as well. And so I would have to say they're not going to do that well, and they're not going to have that much of an impact, at least for now, but they will here in the future if they start to show up in much larger numbers. If they don't, they will have absolutely no impact at all. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and thank you so much for the kind words and the compliment as well. We try our best to keep this channel running while we have people coming in here saying, "You are full of shit, you are too ignorant, and a shit channel." It's like, okay. It's like, we're still here, and we're still covering the news, so, like, thank you. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who help to make it possible, and thank you for the kind words as well, because it does give us the inspiration and the revolutionary zeal, the revolutionary vril to keep this channel running. And so thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Aussie Dave, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Aussie Dave, for that support. And he said, "Do you think that the Australian slingers will be in company with the Australian M1A1 Abrams tanks heading to Ukraine? And it looks like it would be a good combination along with the infantry, of course, and LSA, mate."
And let me go see here. Australian, one second, Australian slinger. Let's see, Australian made, weapon system. Let me go here. Let me go here and try and take a look at this thing, Governor. Alrighty. Oh, wait a minute. We looked at this before. We've looked at this thing before, brother. It's a lightweight counter-drone, fully stabilized engagement system designed for accurate on-the-move operation. I don't know.
It sounds very fancy, I say. A very fancy system.
Sounds very modern, Governor. And that's not an Australian accent, by the way. That's a British one. But beyond that, I would say, I don't know. We haven't heard about these things being provided. They look like they're fairly new and maybe even still in the testing phase or in limited actual field use by the Australians. So I would doubt it a little bit. But the Abrams will show up as they are at the moment, and the Ukrainians will then further modify them with electronic warfare systems and also additional protection in the form of Contact 1 ERA tiles, because they just love Contact 1 ERA tiles in Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion at the moment, because I haven't heard anything at all about additional anti-drone systems being provided by the Australians. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, sorry about that, Melinda Grifford Vaughn. She said, "Did my chat show as a 20? It should have been a 30. It was a 30, but for some reason I put it down as a 20. I don't know why, but thank you very much for the $30 support, that is, because I did write that down incorrectly. We appreciate it. Also, by the way, Melinda. And moving on here to our next one. This one's going to go to LMVG from the live chat. Thank you very much, LMVG, for that super sticker right there. It said, "You are amazing" on it. And thank you very much. We appreciate the kind words and also the support as well. And Enforcer, what say you?
Thank you. And I think, just jokes aside, thank you so much for the support and wanting to say that we're amazing. Y'all are amazing. And that's why we always put in so much work and effort into being here on air every single night, 6 days a week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering this news. Everyone in the world knows that you can count on this channel to be here like clockwork, always covering the news and telling everyone what's up and what's going on out there. And you know, what's crazy, Matthew? You know what's really crazy is that some of the people who work at mainstream news, they live around here. Isn't that crazy?
They do, man. They live right. You mean right here in Birmingham?
Yeah, right here in Birmingham. Isn't that crazy?
Oh man, I believe it too, man.
Man.
I believe it. It's terrible. It's terrible.
It's terrible, man. It's terrible. Like maybe they can hopefully take some notes and bring it back to the mainstream news channels. Like, don't get political and just cover the news. Like, maybe they'll be able to bring that back. Maybe just by being in proximity to us. I don't know. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support, though, because you help us to be able to run this channel the way it's run for years now. We've been running this for 3 straight years, nearly. Well. Actually, the channel has been around for 3 years, but doing this news, it's still got a little ways to go. We got about like 3 months left until it's a full 3 years of doing this. We've just been saying 3 years now for a really long time, and I think it's stuck in our heads. But nevertheless, I do thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because you've helped us to stay on air. You're going to help us to keep on air with that support, and you're able to help us to be able to get the news out. And so thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, by the way, since LMVG did not put a comment with his super chat here, he did put something in the live chat. He said a question for us. He said, have either of you served in the military, and what is your background in reference to military history, operations, etc.? And you are both quite articulate, and lawyers, perhaps. First of all, thank you very much for the kind words, by the way, LMVG. I'm glad you think we're articulate. And speaking of lawyers, we're not lawyers, but we did go to law school for a semester and a half. And then I had to quit that because I didn't like it. And I was like, I'm never going to be a lawyer. And I'm moving on from this permanently because the legal profession honestly quite sucks. So I moved on. My background is in political science and a specialty in international relations. So I have studied this topic before, more so on the side of the political side of things, not necessarily on the military like strategy side of things, but that was a component of it. But the Enforcer, I'll let him actually cover what he's done, but no, I've not served in the military to answer the question. And Enforcer, what say you?
I have not served in the military a single day in my life. Every one of my friends that I knew from school is currently in the military. A decent amount of them, crazily enough, are actually in the Space Force, which is really kind of unique. And you pretty much have to make like a 90 or higher on the ASVAB for the Space Force recruiter to show up. They show up like magic, like no joke. Like every one of these people was like, I want to join the Air Force. And the Air Force recruiter was like, great, here, take the ASVAB. And then they would take it, and then they would make like a 90 or something, and they go, oh my, and then you just hear, in the next room, the Space Force recruiter would come in and be like, hey, you want to join the Space Force? It's like the Air Force, but cooler. And then they'd go join that. But beyond that, I've never been in the military. All my friends have been, pretty much everyone in my life has been. So you hear a lot of stories, and you know, you get to know a lot of people who are in it and currently in the service, but I've never personally stepped a foot into the military one bit, never signed a contract with the military or anything like that. I generally am just a nerd. Like, I like to read, and I really do. Like,
you like to read?
I like to read, but I really do read, unlike others. Like, I actually read, but but beyond that, I just love to read, no joke, and I just read about literally anything and everything. And for some reason, when I was a little kid, something snapped inside of my brain where the only thing I could read about and really get into was history, like anything pertaining to history. So, you know, I can explain to you like the history of a fork or a spoon, like no joke. Matthew's heard me do that before, and I remember that Matthew was like, do you have to say shit about everything? Like when I did it, because like it was like, you know, it's stupid like to talk about the history of a spoon or a fork or anything like that, but that's who I am. And so one of the big things that I really got into was military history, the evolution of doctrines, tactics, technology, how wars were fought, how wars began, like all that kind of stuff. I just obsessed about, read about it till the end of time, read about everything else until the end of time, and so then it just became a really big nerd. And so when I talk about stuff with the military, some people actually say, like we've had people in here say, you know, I've been in the military, and you sound like you've either been in or you really know a lot about it because you're giving a great brief. And that's literally just because I've read an endless volume of stuff about the military and everything going on with it, and all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, when I was in college, unlike Matthew, I didn't do political science. I actually majored in history, which was the crazy thing, because I majored in history and I ended up graduating magna cum laude, but I didn't like study at all in college. I didn't even read in college. I just knew the stuff already. So I was just smacking out essays just off of what I knew. Like every once in a while they would ask for like a primary source. I already knew what I was going to write, so then I just find a primary source, read it, and then add it into what was like logically like known. Like to me it just felt like common knowledge. And so then I just made A's and like maybe a few B's here and there. I then just like slaughtered the whole major, got out, and was like, all right, now I'm a history major. That's largely kind of like my story and like experience with what I've done in my life. But also, I want to let you know we are not that old. Like if you're new to the channel, which I don't really know if you're really new or not, Matthew and me are not old at all. Matthew's 24 years old, and I'm 22. I had to think because for some reason I've been stuck. I'm stuck on being 21 forever in my mind now, man. I'm 21, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm 22, and I always have to correct myself on that. But I'm 22. Matthew's 24, and we haven't really gone through a lot of life. You know, a lot of people think we sound like we're in our 40s or something like that, but we are in our 20s. And so, if you're really impressed with what we say and all that kind of stuff, it's really just from no experience at all and just me reading a lot or Matthew reading a lot and knowing a lot about what he's talking about. Also, someone said he was called Mr. Encyclopedia. Actually, that's very close. I actually was called the Walking Encyclopedia by loads of people. And I was always the person in school that everyone went to when they had a history question in my grade. Like everyone would come to me and be like, hey man, what is this? I only got had by a history teacher one time. I got the whole thing wrong with the Middle East post World War I. I said they were colonies. They were actually mandates. I remember that history teacher. He was the only one to have gotten me. I respect him for that because he actually knew what he was talking about, unlike every other history teacher I had, which like drove me crazy with like the historical lies they would tell, and then you get quizzed on it, and you had to put down the historical lie. Like someone, like if anyone knows, like actually if anyone knows, all of y'all know history. Like the crazy thing that blew my mind in 10th grade is that our history teacher said that America invented the steam train, like the steam locomotive. She said we invented it. I was like, no, we didn't. Because if anyone knows anything, everyone knows the Industrial Revolution began in Britain because they invented the steam engine. They also invented the steam locomotive, the steam pump, and everything else really that went along with steam engines. Like anyone who knows history on a base level knows that. And then they said that America was the heart of the Industrial Revolution. It started here, and we created the steam train, the steam ship. We actually did do that, and everything else. And I was like, that's just wrong. Like, and then they also
That's the
said,
same history teacher that said something about the propeller.
yeah, the propeller. It was never the propeller. It was the propeller. Oh no! Oh my god!
And then she'd go on a tirade about a bad situation with her husband, like every other Tuesday or something like that. To start screaming out the blue. I'm like, oh my god! Like, damn! Can we just get back to the history?
Yeah, I was like, oh, and then there was this one time, y'all. Oh my god! You know what? I think I can actually show y'all this commercial because we are using it for fair use. I'm gonna show y'all this because it just blew my freaking mind that she did this, and I actually got in a bit of an argument with the teacher because of this. So she said, you know, y'all, Christmas is coming around, and I want to just show y'all the civility that's had by Americans in Christmas. And so she pulled up a Sainsbury ad from Sainsbury's, the British, like freaking frozen food store. And she played this ad, this one right here. All right, let me show y'all this. Hang on, let me see if I can get y'all. Am I stupid or am I just dumb? But isn't that British Army insignia on that cap? Isn't that a British service cap on this guy? Isn't it 1914 when this commercial was supposed to be set in? Wasn't America not in the war until like late 1917? We weren't even in the war. And she just sat up there in front of the class for 2 straight minutes and lectured about how the United States was so nice and civil to those barbaric Germans for having some civility towards them on Christmas. So I raised my hand and I was like, Actually, that's the British. We weren't even in the war yet. Like, we would be in it in late 1917. And so, you know what the, like, very rational response was by this teacher that just didn't know what the hell they were talking about? Was to literally tell me in front of the whole class, Andrew, shut up. And that was it. And I was just like, you're an asshole. I was like, that was like my reflex. I was like, you're not only wrong, you're an asshole. You can't even admit you're being wrong right now. I was like, that's stupid.
And that lady had some serious problems, man. That lady had some very bad problems. I remember she gave out like a pop quiz or something like that, and I don't know nothing about history. Like I was just reading from the book and trying to memorize it basically. 'Cause I'm like, I'm not really a history person. I remember I wrote the exact answers that were out of the book on the pop quiz, and later she marked all of it wrong and like went off her own knowledge or some junk and said, "Oh, this is all wrong because this is what really happened." I was like, "What?" I was like, "I literally read out the textbook," and she overrided the textbook to grade it based on her own personal knowledge, which was insane to me.
That was one of the dumbest history teachers I had ever had, and I was like, oh my god. And the thing is, I don't even know why, but like a lot of kids in the school liked her. I don't know, maybe because like for reasons I have no clue, but I just got to where I resented that teacher because like I only respect teachers when they know what they're talking about and they're nice, when they're nice and they know what they're talking about. She was not necessarily nice and she had no clue what she was talking about, and I was like, what the hell are you even on about most of the time? And like she said another thing that blew my mind. She said the entire war of 1812 was fought on the Great Lakes. Like, so the whole war in between America and Britain, where like the Capitol building and the White House got burned down in Washington, D.C., that war? Yeah, that never happened in her story. The entire war was fought on the Great Lakes by little boats. Like, I was like, are you, like, stupid? Are you out of your freaking mind right now? I guess the Battle of New Orleans never happened either, right? Like, that wasn't in the Great Lakes, so it literally did not exist in this timeline. I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
The worst part though is like I thought I had it rough with the teachers in high school and stuff, and I was just trying to get like the A. That's all I was trying to get in high school. But then I moved on from there. I was like, okay, that's finally over with. I moved on to college, and then I realized, oh damn, like the boss level just arrived. Like with fighting with the teachers and the professors and stuff like that. It's like the boss, educator is here. It's the professors for literally fighting over everything, fighting over personal opinions, fighting over the grade being subjective and not objectively graded. It got worse in college. I thought it was going to get better.
Man, I remember in college in my department, history was pretty decent. But I remember like, oh y'all, this was a story. This was a trip. Like this actually happened while I was like running the channel. I just didn't tell anyone about it. But I was actually taking a modern Chinese history course. So it was from I think 1911, from the collapse of the Qing dynasty all the way up till the present day with the People's Republic of China as it is now. And the teacher was from China, like from communist China, not Taiwan. And so I was like, this is going to be interesting. And like they never would say anything bad about China. Like the whole history, like literally, I'm not kidding. In the earlier history text that we had to read, the entire Western world was called barbarians. And we had to reference the Western world as barbarians on the first, like, essay. I was like, there's no way in hell I'm literally calling myself a barbarian. It's like, we're that barbaric. Why the hell are you over here in this college teaching this course? Like, that makes no sense to me. Like, that was so stupid. Like the Great Famine, well, not the Great Famine, but the Great Leap Forward came around in this, like, history lesson. Completely skipped over. Like, we didn't talk about how 40 million Chinese starved to death because of the poor planning by Mao Zedong. Didn't talk about that a bit. Like, it was like, oh, someone got beat with some belt buckles. It was kind of a little bit of a rough time, but hey, everyone got by and it got better. It's like 40 million people died. You didn't even cover this. Like, we didn't even talk about it. Like, it was literally like stricken from the book. It was like nothing happened in the 60s. Amen. Moving on. I was like, what? They didn't even really talk about Tiananmen Square. Like, they didn't talk about anything. And like, we had to write essays on this like revisionist Chinese history, like almost the kind of history they actually teach in China, because it's very similar, like with what it is. And like, while they'll admit that some things weren't great, it is so sugar coated. Like, so many people talk about how in America history was sugar coated, like what we did to the Native Americans, you know, in our push westwards and stuff like that. I'll be honest with y'all, there really isn't a lot of sugar coating involved. Honestly, it's usually represented very one-sided against America, although sometimes there was things like the Fort Mims massacre in Alabama that led to the Creek War that then preceded that right afterwards. It sometimes is one-sided, to be entirely honest. But with Chinese history, it is so sugar-coated, it's diabetic. Like, they'll be like, we've done maybe one or two things that might be a little, like, questionable, you know, but they're like minor things. But, you know, beyond that, we're just a great country. It's like, whoa, like, this is crazy, man. Like, killing 40 million of your own people, and that isn't even given like a footnote, really. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, by the way, I see Rob Eisman's back. Also, welcome back, Rob.
Welcome.
I'm very sorry to hear about the situation. By the way, it sounds like you're having a tough time with. It looks like he accidentally maybe hurt himself or something like that. It looks like he tore his abdominal wall and a bunch of other horrible things. So, Rob, I hope you're hanging in there. By the way, I just wanted to say that live on the air since you can hear me here. I'm not sure if you're seeing all my chats or not, but I hope you're doing okay, and I hope they can get to you pretty quick with that. And I really hate to hear that it is a bit of a time there for you. So hopefully it does improve. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I hope you're doing well, Rob Eisman. I just saw also what Matthew's seeing as well. I just read it. That is very unfortunate. We're glad to have you back. But at the same time, I hope that you're taking care of yourself and hopefully fighting that bit of an uphill battle. I'm sure that's not the greatest thing. But nevertheless, I know that the entirety that I'll say, Matthew, me included, are behind you 100% of the way. And I hope that you have a speedy recovery and things are on the mend really quickly. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But I hope you do get better once again, Rob Eisman, because you've been an old guard of this channel for a very long time, and we would love to see you back here every single night, but in good health, though. And with that, we are on to that next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Mr. Lobotomy, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Mr. Lobotomy, for that support. I said, have you guys seen the Chilean military formal dress uniforms? Oh yeah, we have. We've seen them, all right. They're interesting, fascinating. Very interesting uniform. But unfortunately, let's see a look. Let's take a look.
We will take a look. We've seen these so many times. The shock value is honestly lost. But yeah, you know, it's a thing. You know, it's very much a thing. It's actually not Nazi, like a lot of people like kind of like confuse this to be Nazi. It's actually Prussian. The helmets, though, are Stahlhelms, though, and Stahlhelms were used in World War I and World War II. These particular models, if you look at the brim, they're actually a little bit wider brimmed than the actual World War II models, so we actually believe that these are more so modeled on some Stahlhelm models from right after World War I in the interwar period. That's what we generally think. I'll have to look into that a little bit more, though, and just make sure, but still, yeah, you know, the uniforms are very questionable, just to say the least. But still, with that, thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Zach G, who puts in a 20 as well. And huge shout out to you, Zach, for the support. He said, your streams help me get through these 12-hour shifts. And thank you for the hard work and the great reporting. And long live the LSA. And also, Zach, if you don't mind me asking as well, 12-hour shift. Like, if you don't mind me asking, where or do you work? Like, that is a very long shift. I think the longest shifts I've ever worked is 10 hours, and that was a doozy for me. But 12 hours is crazy. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say, he probably, if I had to take a guess, he's probably a first responder, a firefighter, or working in a hospital. Usually that's where 12-hour shifts are pretty common, actually. But I wouldn't know for sure, so we'll see. Hopefully we get an answer to that. But still, I'm glad to hear that we do make the 12-hour shifts pass by a little bit quicker, because so many people actually listen to the show while they're working at their job. And that's also why we narrate every single clip. Even if y'all can easily see what's happening in them, we also narrate them because there are a lot of people who aren't seeing the screen. They just have the phone sitting somewhere and they're just listening to the audio, so it's kind of like a radio show for them, and so that's why we describe everything. But I still thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to help folks pass the time like yourself. And I got to thank you once again for greatly appreciating this and enjoying it enough that you would want to support it and keep it rolling, because not a lot of folks do, actually. I think we maybe have 20 or 25 super chats tonight, maybe. And 109,000 people have watched the stream at this point while we're live on air. And while we don't ever want anyone to feel like they're obligated to support the channel, we do make a living doing this. And folks like you, the very few out of the many who watch this channel, make this thing possible for everyone. And so we thank you massively for that. And everyone ought to know that, because a lot of people always go, oh, why do you read off the super chats? Why do you give some respect and thanks to the people who literally make this possible, not only for me to watch, but for them to watch and for us to do? And the reason why we always give so much time is because these are really the people who are responsible for the show every night. Every single super chatter deserves to have their name called off, even if it is $1 super chat, because combined, they have made it possible for us to keep the lights on behind the scenes, to pay our bills, and to be able to do this as a job. If it wasn't for these folks who were supporting this channel, no one would have a show to watch, and we wouldn't have a show to work on. And that's why we always thank every single person massively, no matter how big or small their support is, because they have that big of an impact on keeping this show and this channel alive. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Scott, who puts in a 20. And huge shout out to you, Scott, for the support as well. We appreciate it. He said, what type of rifles will the North Koreans be using in Ukraine? Are they effective weapons? And the Iraqi army received many K2 rifles in Iraq, and they complained about them to us. And they wanted M4s and M16s, which they now have.
I would say that the North Koreans, if we're talking about the North Koreans, they're going to be provided some sort of an AKM or an AK-74. It's going to be fairly standard. Even if it's provided to them by the Russians, they do have training to understand how those systems work. They're pretty ubiquitous in how they operate. The AK-74 and the AKM literally have the same breakdown, so it won't be that much for them to use. So they'll certainly be using some sort of an AK platform without a doubt. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing running. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I had no idea how many industries in the United States did 12-hour shifts. Like, I'm seeing like a ton of different people from like virtually every industry saying, oh yeah, I do 12-hour shifts, like no problem. In fact, I'm doing 14. It's like, what? It's like, that's a long shift. Like I can understand like, you know, working maybe like 8 to 10 or something like that, but 12 to 14, like on the daily, that's kind of wild. Like that's really wild. But anyways, moving on here to our next one. We have a $10 super chat from Not For One, Yet For All, Ukraine. Who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much for the support. They said, thank you so much for no ads, and your last stream had them, and so annoying. And keep up the great work, boys, and LSA.
And I thank you so much for support, Not For One, Yet For All, Ukraine. And I actually did explain that a little bit earlier. And to go through that again, just to make sure everyone is up to speed, the monetization is off on that stream. And it was off last night. It was off when the ads are running today. The problem is that it has been copyrighted. Tonight's stream will also be copyrighted because the U.S. anthem we have, apparently, Content ID doesn't really like it. But the ads were running last night because of another reason, and it specifically was because Content ID has falsely claimed that our Armed Forces medley is someone else's. I, for one, know that that is the one specific one that could never be Content ID'd, because I literally had it made from the ground up. I paid a composer that works with Disney Pixar $1,500 to compose a custom Armed Forces medley for this channel. We are the only people in possession that have the ownership of the copyright over that rough draft, because like the one y'all are listening to right now, it isn't even the final version, it's a rough draft of the final version, and we have been playing that very, very seldomly, to be entirely honest, in our intro. And now Content ID is saying that Joe Blow somewhere else in some other group has copyright ownership over the very thing that we had independently made on our own. No one even has access to it. No one even owns it except for us. We're the only people who have this rough draft and this track beyond the composer himself. And so I was like, that is absolutely ridiculous. And also someone said, maybe the composer stole it. No, because I actually tracked down, because YouTube will tell you like what the copyrighted content is. I tracked down the specific track that is being Content ID'd supposedly, and it is a completely different track than ours. Like, it is entirely different. That one was done by a live band. Ours is done by a digital reproduction, and it's on a completely brand new composition of the Armed Forces medley. So it is entirely not the case with that. This is a false Content ID, and we're having to go and get this cleared up right now. But until then, there will be ads running on that. because, you know, it is what it is. That's how content ID works. But y'all can see that I haven't disputed it at the moment, so they should eventually disappear, hopefully. And hopefully the content, hopefully the people who are getting the dispute, which are the people that the content ID was falsely claimed for, see that it is a case of mistaken identity with that, because it obviously is, and then they just go and remove it. That would be the easiest thing to do. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and thank you so much once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running, and hopefully this will not be the same case for today, because we still do not have the ads on like y'all just saw, but if they do show up, I want y'all to know that it's not by our own doing. And so with that, we are on to the next one, but thank you so much once again for the support.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $50 support from Top Flight. And thank you very much, Top Flight, for that support. Also, by the way, it's not saying here this is your first ever super chat, but I could have sworn this might have been your first. So if it is, huge shout out to you. And they said, love the show, LSA all day, and from Aegis Ashore in Poland. Hey, look, it's a Polish viewer. How about that?
Hey, and hello. And let's see if I can find it. So I found Aegis, which is in T. In Texas? Matthew likes that. But beyond that, I can't find Aegis ashore in Poland. Maybe that's a specific province. I'm not entirely sure, but nevertheless, I thank you so much for the support, Top Flight, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for being a Polish viewer. That is incredibly cool. Like, we do know that there's Polish viewers here, but we don't see them a lot. And we always love to see LSA viewers from all around the world. We have LSA viewers in South Korea, in Taiwan, in Japan, in pretty much all of the European countries, in North America, in South America, in Africa, in Asia itself, the Asian mainland, like India. We actually have some Indian viewers. We have Australian and New Zealand viewers. We have viewers from the Philippines. Literally anywhere and everywhere, even inside of Russia, the LSA has viewers. And it's really cool to think that that's the case, and it's really cool to have another poll here. As we always say, we love the polls, both the ones we run on this channel and the ones in real life, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because you make it possible for us to say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And also, apparently Aegis Ashore is a American naval base in Poland. Let me see if I can find it. Aegis Ashore. Yeah, here we go. Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense System. I see. And where is this specifically? In Poland? Oh, here we go. This is the one.
Oh, wow. That's very advanced looking.
So it is Redzikowo, Poland. So let's go here. And there it is. And I believe it's that building right here. So they are here at this base in Poland. Pretty cool to know, Top Flight, and really neat to know that you're one of the Americans out there at the very line of contact with the adversaries of the Western world, standing them off every single day, right outside the town of Slupsk. Pretty neat town name, actually. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again for the massive support. And also, what's going on in the live chat, Matthew?
I have no idea. Like, I'm trying to figure it out as I'm going, man. I'm trying to, like, use some context clues here and fill in the blanks.
I don't even know what's going on with that. Seems interesting, though. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Neiman Bauer. And thank you very much, Neiman, for that $10 support. He said, good morning, Enforcers. And did you all have a warm cup of coffee made from snow? Greetings and long live the West.
I thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. I would have to be honest with you, we've been enjoying a nice cup of coffee made of snow, and we've also
and watching YouTube on expensive Dell computers.
From our factories, which we live in. And also, today we had a delicious bird that was supposed to be eaten on Tuesday, but the evil Americans who buy guns, especially to do something to children, have decided to eat the bird on Thursday. But nevertheless, I do thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And we did actually have a nice cup of coffee made of snow today. And I wonder if it's going to snow this year down here in Alabama. It probably won't. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Massey III, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Robert, for that support. He said, have you guys seen By Dawn's Early Light?
By Dawn's Early Light. Let me go pull that up. It rings a bell. By Dawn's Early Light. It's a 1990 thriller. And let's see here. In 1991, dissident officials in the Soviet Union launched a nuclear missile at Donetsk from a site in NATO member Turkey. Soviet automated defense systems, believing that a NATO attack is in progress, execute a measured launch of intercontinental ballistic missiles at the United States. After Donetsk is destroyed, Strategic Air Command scrambles its forces, and SAC Commander General Renning urges the president to authorize a large-scale counterattack. The Soviet leader explains the dissidents' anxious to the president. He asked the United States to stand down, citing the two nations' improving relations. Let's see. Interesting. I've never actually heard of this one before. I was reading like the plot there and then really quickly skimmed it. I have never heard of this show before. I'll have to take a look into it though, because James Earl Jones, unfortunately passed away quite recently actually, is in it. So I bet it has to be a pretty interesting movie. But nevertheless, well, actually a series. Yeah, it was a movie. It was not a series. And so with that, thank you so much for support. I have personally never heard of that one before, but I will have to look into it because it does seem interesting as far as the plot goes. But thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one's going to go to Quick History, who puts in a 10 and says, given the threats to U.S. satellites from China and Russia, how can we rule out a Red Dawn scenario and we're significantly vulnerable without satellite technology?
Let's see, without satellite, there's no way that a Red Dawn really could be conducted because even without satellite information, there is a pretty decent intelligence network inside of Mexico currently, and for a Red Dawn situation to happen, Mexico would have to go red. Well, not red, but they would have to be Russian aligned, and that's not going to be happening anytime soon. So a Red Dawn situation would not happen under any circumstances. However, really, to be entirely honest, our modern intelligence network, even without satellites, is so well fleshed out. Satellites really don't mean a lot, like at least in the terms of avoiding a war like that. Like the satellite technology that we have allows us good information on Russian mobilizations and also movements inside of Russia's interior, which would be really hard to see before. But beyond that, we don't really need that to be able to avoid an all-out war, to be entirely honest. So I would say even without satellites, we would be able to avoid a Red Dawn situation. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping us to keep this channel running, because I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, Matthew, apparently I'm seeing that there may be an instigator in the chat right now that's causing the de-evolution right now. So if you can talk at that person.
Devolution.
Devolution, yes, not de-evolution. That sounds stupid. I like to read, but nevertheless, if you would like to clear that out, I would be greatly appreciated, Matthew.
I'll go ahead and take him out, man, because I'm not really sure who it is.
Okay, we will do this very quickly. We'll do a quick measure like that, and we'll put that up to review. But still, with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so up next we have a $10 support from M&M. And thank you very much for that $10 support, by the way. I did not see a comment left with it, but we appreciate it. Also, shout out to SG Lioditis, who puts in a $9 donation as well, and thank you very much also. Also, a 5 from Uncovered Cube, who's a longtime channel legend, as well as a 5 from Sean Curtis. And huge shout out to M, SG Lioditis, as well as Uncovered and Sean. And thank you all very much for that support. Without comments, that is. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to thank y'all for the support as well. Because while y'all didn't throw in comments, y'all support is greatly appreciated, and it helps us to keep this channel running day in and day out. And so a massive thanks to each and every single one of y'all, because once again, y'all make the Lee Spring Army possible, and y'all make it a reality for us to say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Rob Keith, who puts in a 10 and says, take one from the chat. And we shall, Rob, and thank you very much for sponsoring a live chat question. And this one's going to go to Up Guy, who says, do we, meaning the United States, still have nukes in Turkey?
I do not believe that we have nukes in Turkey currently. Let me check that, though. Are U.S. nukes in Turkey? The first thing I see is someone saying, it's time to get U.S. nukes out of Turkey. And this was in 2019. So I'm assuming, let's see here. Let's provide nuclear weapons for. All right, so yeah, we do have nuclear weapons in Turkey currently. So yes, to answer that question, American nuclear weapons are in Turkey. And so with that, thank you so much for giving support. I hope that does address that question incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a very generous support from Bradley Barrows. Thank you very much, Mr. Barrows, for that $20 support. support. That's the 10th ever super chat on live stream, and we appreciate it very much, good sir, for that $20 support. And it's very smashing. It's very delightful. We appreciate it. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Bradley Barrows, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so thank you so much once again for that massive support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and let's see here. Let's see. Someone said something here. I'm not going to call off on the streams. We're not going to entertain stupidity from other YouTubers. Let's see here. Did y'all see vile? I'm not shocked by that. Someone's talking about some other Ukrainian YouTubers' vile comments about America. Not shocked by that whatsoever. That's what happens when you have political hacks getting involved in the Ukraine support communities. You have stupidity like that start running rampant. But anyways, moving on from that one, we're not going to entertain that. We're going on to this one, which goes to Right Salum, but they put in an $8 donation and said, "Hell yes" for the shirts, and big fan in Australia.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. Helping this channel to keep on running. Heavens me. And I also have to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. Heavens. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And I have to tell y'all, I'll be entirely honest with you all, I am, oh snap, something went wrong displaying this web page. Error, out of memory. Thank you so much for letting me know that, YouTube and Google, because I know I'm not out of memory. I've checked this before, and everything's running just fine in the background. Also, by the way, I just want to put this out there to y'all, great heavens, before I get on to telling y'all about something else, because this annoys the hell out of me every time I refresh my control room. YouTube has a little banner right now that's popping up, and it keeps on saying, creators adopting live automated mid-rolls, which means running ads in the middle of our show, on average, saw an uptick of 20% in stream ad revenue per hour. Learn more. It's like, no, we don't run ads. Like, no, like that's been a thing for 3 years. I don't know why there's like been this big push to have us like added memberships and turn on ads on streams. Like, we just don't do that. Like, we never will. But anyways, beyond that, one thing that's getting me a little strung out right now is that I'm having to balance what the actual super chats are saying, and I can't see them because I've had to close the spreadsheet, Matthew, because apparently that thing eats up just a little bit of memory, and it ends up causing my computer to crap out whenever I click over to it sometimes. Like, not like completely crap out, but, you know, have some issues. So let me see here. Which super chat was that again, Matthew? So that way I can make sure to get to it.
Let's see here. That was Right Saloom.
So let me see if I can find that one. Right Saloom. Right Saloom. There we go. Hell yes for the shirts. Big fan in Australia. And thank you so much for support. Sorry that I didn't actually get to that. And thank you for being a big fan all the way from Australia. And we would love to do the shirts. I think we're going to probably start working on that here very soon, because making shirts isn't an incredibly hard thing to do on our merch side of stuff. And not only that, we could come up with all kinds of cool ideas. We could even commission some folks to make some incredibly cool ideas for them. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Butchie the Crouton, who's, of course, a longtime channel legend who put in a $10 donation, and also, excuse me, goodness, Butchie put in a super sticker of the YouTube creator grinding the wheels on that game and share like it's no tomorrow, skidding it out like a Tokyo Drift, or if you're like the hot dog man, a Tokyo Grift. But anyways, thank you very much for that support, and Enforcer, what say you?
And I have to say, thank you so much for the support, Butchie the Crouton, and helping this channel to keep on running. I love to see the super chat. Of course, no comment, but we are still greatly appreciative of it, and we thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Cachulian343, who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Cachulian, for that support. And also, Enforcer said, who is a YouTuber? Or text message. It's that same idiot again, the one that we've dealt with before. It's that one idiot. Honestly, I really can't even hold back words anymore. Like, I've tried to be like as diplomatic as possible. I'm not going to name the guy off. We're not trying to start a direct beef here. I just want the guy to sit over there and be quiet and leave us alone. I don't want to talk to him. But he's a goof, an absolute goof, low IQ. I'm surprised he even has an audience, and it's not Hot Dog Man, it's someone else. I think you know who I'm talking about, Enforcer. But anyways,
wait a minute.
Putting all that,
wait a minute. Is it the pissing contest?
No, it's not him.
Welcome back, Defenders.
Yes.
Oh, what? Where? No, wait a minute, where? I gotta find this.
And when you say where, like, what do you mean?
Like on YouTube, on Twitter? Where was this?
Yeah, it's probably on YouTube.
You know what? I'm gonna have to check that out after stream. We're not gonna get involved in making a beef with someone, but you know, like, look, folks, let's just be entirely honest here. The folks who are political hacks who got into this segment, they do not care about Ukraine. They're just using the giant mounds of corpses from this war to try and talk about their own domestic political points. And I'll be honest with y'all, most of them have the most room temperature takes that I've ever seen. They're some of the stupidest ones ever. And I would be entirely honest with y'all. I generally am happy to see that a lot of people wised up to that when most of these people did get political, and about half of their viewership left their channels after that, because that was deserved. A lot of people need to see the kind of goofballs these people really are, because they have about as little sense upstairs as the people they hate the most, which are Putin and generally the Russian military leadership as a whole. It's sad to see that this entire sphere has been poisoned with people like that who make it about themselves and what they think about American domestic politics, because I think we've done pretty well on keeping that out of our news coverage. And it seems as though many people do enjoy that, because we don't try and make y'all feel like you're wrong because you have your own opinions. Y'all are all Americans, or at least living in some part of the Western world. You have your own right to your own opinions. I'm not here to tell you one way or another. But there are so many people out there like that kind of a person who thinks that because they have a mouth, they should be able to tell other people what they should be thinking and why they're wrong, or to say incredibly stupid things against the United States of America and the amazing republic that they live in, which makes no sense at all, considering that the alternative is to go live in Russia or China, and they probably would be in a human meat grinder if they lived in Russia, or they'd be grinded into human meat in China, one or the other. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least in my opinion. But, you know, that's not shocking to me at all. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I'll say this as well, because I'm sure someone's going to clip this. I stand by my comments 100%. If someone plays this later and says, "Oh, they said something about so and so" or something like that, this is my personal opinion. Like, you can disagree with me if you want to, but ultimately, dragging in politics to this Ukrainian issue, it's been proven time and time again that it only divides support for Ukraine. Ukraine is currently at war right now. They're trying to get as much support as possible, and even Zelensky is not taking political sides because he needs to make sure that he has support no matter who the president is. And when you have American citizens putting their own personal beliefs and also their obsessions above the needs of the people of Ukraine, that shows you what they truly believe in and what truly matters to them. It's not the people of Ukraine, it's their political beliefs, and they're putting that over the lives of the Ukrainian civilians. So when someone plays this later and says, "Oh, they're bashing so-and-so," yes, I did bash them. I think they're a political hack, and they have some really stupid takes. But anyways, moving on here to our next one. This one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Kachulian, for that support. They said, "I wonder if Kadyrov decided he wants independence back, and kicking Putin out would be popular, and why would a vassal, or why be a vassal when he could be king, and Russia is weak?"
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking too. He's probably thinking that at this point, especially seeing what Prigozhin showed, which is Russia is internally weak. He could try and pull that off and maybe even succeed for a good while, and there would be a lot of benefits for him in the meantime. So I would agree with that. That probably is the kind of thinking process that Kadyrov is going through at this point. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a $5 donation and puts in the regular, the number 5. And CK Bold said, "Take a live chat question." And we shall take a live chat question. And this one's going to go to, guess who? It's going to go to, while I stall while the spreadsheet loads. This one says Night Watcher. It's from Night Watcher, it is. And they said, "When do you think we'll retroactively decide that World War III actually started?"
We probably will decide that World War III has begun once there is a united front by the Axis powers and by the Allies. There already is a united front largely on our side, it's just that we haven't been actively involved in the war yet in NATO, or for that matter in East Asia. But once those wars begin and we unite and say that we're going to fight all of these wars simultaneously against this Axis power that exists, then that will be technically when the World War has begun. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here goes to Joseph Andronako, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Joseph, as well for that support. He said that the U.S. has 4 corps, and that the best known is the 18th, which has the 82nd.
And I thank you so much for the support. But if I remember correctly, the corps are mostly administrative at this point, and they actually don't really serve a role, if that's the best way to put it, in actual combat abilities or actually fighting a war at this point. I don't think they actually are a part of the chain of command. It's just more so an administrative thing to say that all of these units are a part of this corps, but it's not like the North Korean command structure where that corps actually has commanders and is commanding the divisions and then the brigades below them, if I remember correctly, because I know that the Chinese model, which is largely attempt to modernize along an American model, does have, I believe, divisions, regiments, and such things like that still in their unit structures, but they have no actual meaning any longer. Everything works on the group army, the brigade, and the battalion level. And while there is, I believe, regiments and there are divisions, it's all administrative. It's more so a clerical thing than an actual usable kind of a unit structure at this point. Because a lot of that, as time has gone by, has proven to be incredibly over cumbersome for the kind of environment we exist in now, because the communications technology has increased so much over just the time from World War II to now, that all of that kind of different command structure to make it easier to operate a army on the field is making it a lot more difficult nowadays to actually operate an army on the field. So a lot of it ends up getting kind of cut. Like, it historically still exists. Like, there are divisions here in America, like the 3rd Division, but the 3rd Division only exists on kind of an administrative level. It more so is the army that these brigades are a part of that make up that division that actually count. And then the brigade combat teams are, really the actual fighting unit, well, the larger strategic size fighting unit, and then the battalions are the tactical level fighting unit on the battlefield. At least that's how I understand it, and I could be wrong. But you are correct. There are still corps in the United States. It's just that they really don't have an impact on how we fight any longer, or actually are a part of the working chain of command, I guess you could say. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Neiman Bauer, who puts in a 5 and said, "We need merch, and please make sure to ship worldwide. And if possible, you could sign some of the merch, and I'd even pay for it."
Hey, and thank you so much for support. We've actually done that in the past. Signing merch, though, can get crazy, because we didn't even think, like, when we did the limited edition run of the LSA flags, I think our original anticipated number was like 250 flags or something like that sold, and it was way above that. Like, not to get into the actual number, but it was way above that. And so I was sitting there like for a week, literally all day, just signing, and like, I didn't think it would be that bad, but I was feeling like my wrist was going to explode by the end of that. And so we could probably do that, but this time we would have to charge extra, just so that way a lot of people don't get the autograph, so that way it's a manageable number. We would probably have to do something like that, but we could look into that here in the near future. We probably will be putting out shirts. We'll see about signing them. I can't guarantee that we will sign them or have an option to even sign them, but we will see. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Pure Life, who put in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Pure Life, for that support, and we appreciate it very much. And we also had a 5 from Spam Hoffen, who said, "Our son turned 2 these days, and has it been a year since my last super chat? And yes, Australian Alps are the best, and check out the view from Larimos."
Hey, and thank you so much for your support, and we will check out the view from Larimos. And hopefully I'm spelling that correctly. I have a feeling I'm not. I'm going to have to go reference the super chat really quickly, but happy birthday to your baby child who just turned 2 years old. I'm sure that has to be a massive milestone, crazily enough. That child is a year younger than this channel, which is really weird to think about. Like, I'm not going to lie, that's actually really weird to think about, Spamhoffen. But nevertheless, oh, wait a minute, it was the Austrian Alps. Matthew was lagging, and it sounded like Australian Alps. So let me go to the Austrian Alps, and we will check out Lermoos, which is spelled like this. And so here we are. It's very close. It's actually on the German border. That's cool. But here it is. Oh, dang, Matthew, that is really cool. That kind of looks like the Teton Peaks.
That reminds me of that Johnny Quest episode where that pterodactyl bird was terrorizing the town below us, like the mountain where it lived on. Yeah. Turu.
It's just like dying in the tar pit or something. But this is beautiful, actually. This is gorgeous. You know what? We have to go to Austria someday. I hope we can, because this would be so cool to see in real life. Look at that water, dude. Not a single brain-eating amoeba in it, I bet you. But nevertheless, I thank you so much once again for support, Spumhofen, and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, thank you so much for being one of our Austrian viewers. Not our Australian viewers, but our Austrian viewers. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and sharing that with us. And also, a big happy birthday to your baby child that just turned 2 today. Must be a massive milestone for y'all. And I hope that they continue to grow up to be an upstanding citizen of the great state of Austria. And that's not a state as in like a U.S. state, that's like a nation. But anyways, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the super chat goes to Octavian Timarosinu, who puts in a 5 and says, why is there a statue of Tecumseh in Washington, D.C., who fought on the British side, Canada, in the War of 1812? I never understood it.
That's an interesting question. The American dynamic with Native Americans has been an interesting one, to say the least, and it's been very streamlined in the modern kind of an understanding, or at least a public understanding, that makes it a lot more black and white than what it really was. Tecumseh was an Indian chief who did lead an Indian nation against the United States of America in the Revolutionary War and a little bit of a while afterwards. And if I remember correctly, he was the leader of the... Let me go actually make sure that I'm saying this correctly, because I was about to say the Iron Confederacy. And let's see, he was forming... Travel Wiley, he formed a Native American Confederacy, so he did do that. But was it the Iron Confederacy? Known for organized Native American resistance. Let's see here. And then he also fought in the War of 1812, and then he was killed. But let's see here. Family. Dang, this is so freaking hard to find info on. What in the world was the Confederacy? I would have to assume it's the Iron Confederacy, if anything. But I want to make sure that I'm saying that correctly. We'll just call it Tecumseh's Confederacy. But anyways, the thing is that nowadays it's considered black and white. It largely has been since about the 1960s and 70s, where Native Americans in general, in any kind of involvement they have with the United States, is always viewed as the United States was just like bullying them and like throwing rocks in their windows just because. But there was a lot more of a nuanced kind of relationship that was had with Native Americans when you really look at the history of it, where sometimes American action against the Native Americans was largely dictated by Native American actions towards the United States instead of the other way around. The best example of this, and really the moments that created a hostile atmosphere in between the Native Americans and the United States, or at least the early United States at the onset, was actually the massacre that happened at Jamestown. A lot of people don't know this, but the Native Americans near Jamestown pretty much almost attacked the English settlers immediately once they arrived. And about 3 years later, they actually conducted a massacre which ended up killing, I believe, a quarter or half of the population of the Jamestown or Virginia Company's colony at Jamestown, which was a pretty watershed moment, at least in Virginia, where the English settlers of the region would then start to treat the Native Americans on a hostile level or an unfriendly or untrusting level from that point forward. Another thing that happened completely separate from that, because you have to remember that the colonies were completely separate. It's not a unified America like we see nowadays, so a lot of the colonial experiences in different colonies were completely different than others. And the other watershed moment that really made American-Native relations sour for the rest of really history was King Philip's War in the Massachusetts Bay Colony area. What happened with this one is that the Pilgrims, crazily enough, the Virginia Company actually had far less friendly relations with the natives, just because like the atmosphere wasn't conducive down there to that. But up in the Massachusetts Bay area, relations were actually pretty okay for the most part up until 1699. And in 1699, what happened was some Native Americans killed some settlers in some sort of a feud or some sort of a fight that happened near a lake in the area. The colonial government requested that the Indians hand over the Native Americans, well, the Indians, for trial, really execution at that point, because they had committed murder, and that was the law, that if you committed murder, you were to be executed at the time. The Indians refused. And this started to create some pretty hostile tensions. A war broke out. It was actually started by surprise attacks by the Indian tribes in the area against the settlers, or the colonists, if you want to call them that. And this is what kicked off King Philip's War. The colonists were almost completely wiped out. 33% of all the colonists in the Massachusetts Bay Area died during this war. And in the end, it was just a absolute miracle and a stroke of luck that the colonists ended up pretty much wiping out the Indian tribes that were warring with them at the time. And this is what largely dictated from that point forward the experiences at Jamestown and the experiences at the Massachusetts Bay Colony, how English settlers in particular and Indians treated each other from that point forward. And so from that point on, we saw that neither side really trusted each other, and a lot of the times, Indian tribes would end up conducting pretty much preemptive attacks on the settlers, or the settlers, seeing that that was coming, would end up conducting preemptive attacks on them. And that just continued on until we literally went all the way across the continent, creating the modern-day United States as we know. But the stories that actually happened were a lot more nuanced than the ones we hear in the modern day. And that's something that really has led to, statues like Tecumseh, someone who fought against the United States in the War of 1812, to be erected in the Capitol building. It doesn't really make a lot of sense with a great deal of historical context. The guy was a literal enemy of the United States for no other reason than the British told him he'd get some benefits if he fought against us. And it just doesn't really make a lot of sense on that, to be entirely honest. Like I'm not saying like the Native Americans are horrific. I'm not saying that they're great people either. They're as nuanced and have as much good things and bad things going for them as anyone else, including the United States. It's just, it's not right to paint one side as like perfectly good and another side is perfectly bad, unless if it's a very extreme example. And I would have to be honest, there isn't really an extreme example in U.S. history to go one side was evil and one side was great, or the other way around. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it appears that Enforcer Matt is going to be getting off for the night, which is understandable because we are starting to get a little bit on into the later wee hours of the night. So Matthew, do you have any last words?
I do have a last word or two I would like to say. I would like to make the statement that I'm about to have to leave the stream because I'm getting awfully tired and my brain is starting to go. So 100%, folks, thank you all once again for another great stream tonight. I will be seeing you all tomorrow night on the stream, but tomorrow is the Enforcer's Short War video day. So you will not be hearing from me at midday tomorrow, but you will be hearing from me on the evening stream. So with that, thank you all once again for supporting the channel and our work tonight. We do appreciate that very much, by the way. Thank you all very much for that. And we'll be seeing you then. So ta-ta for now, and bye-bye.
And good night to Enforcer Matt, and we'll be continuing this on. I also have to be honest with y'all, I am also exhausted as well, and I want to make sure to try and get a little bit more sleep tonight than normal. So I'm going to be speeding this up just a little bit. So moving on from that, thank you once again for support, Octavian Tim Rosano. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the next one, which is Marc-Andre Brunet, who threw in a 2 and said, Salut à tout la communauté, LSA. And hey, LSA. And thank you so much for support, Marc-Andre Brunet, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is the $2 super chat from the Dela Cruz. And the Dela Cruz asks, can Ukraine use Super Tucano for any mission? Largely due to the air defense that the Russians have, it probably wouldn't be that usable. Usually those are kind of used in complete air superiority sorts of environments. Where there's low intensity combat going on. Ukraine wouldn't really be the best place for a Super Tucano, to be entirely honest. But I do thank you for the support in asking that question, because it is a good one. The Super Tucano is quite versatile in some situations, but not necessarily in this one. The wrong tool for the wrong job. But moving on from that, we have a $2 super chat from Andrew Honeycutt. And Andrew Honeycutt said, just got home from work done. I'm a custodian done. And I thank you so much for the support. And Andrew Honeycutt, you are one of the folks that I'm always talking to here on this channel. I always tell everyone in America and really in the Western world that every single person plays their part in this nation. Whether you be a billionaire running one of the largest companies in this country or you're a janitor, every single person has their role to play in this country. And no one should ever feel like their role is useless or worthless. Being a custodian, some people look down on that. I actually think it is an important job, because who in the world would be cleaning the buildings that everyone uses every single day and everyone trashes every single day if it wasn't for custodians? there would be no one. Y'all play as important a job in this country as anyone else, as the chefs in restaurants or the fry cooks in fast food places, to the drivers of buses, the folks who sit there and keep everything running around the world, the linemen who work on the electrical lines, the engineers who run the locomotives, the pilots who fly the planes. Every single person plays their role, no matter how big or how small they really think it is. Everyone comes together to make this nation survive every single day. And so I thank you so much for the support, Andrew Honeycutt, and being one of the people in this amazing republic who is working incredibly hard, like every other American, to keep this nation running in their own way. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $20 super chat from Bradley Barrows, an LSA Melman here from the United States of America. And Bradley Barrows said, after World War I, the British thought that their next enemy may be the United States, and FDR had plans to invade Canada. True, third time. Actually, the U.S.-British relations were actually pretty good. War Plan Red, which is what you're talking about, which is one that was made while FDR was president, was one made by the War Department to just come up with a hypothetical scenario for literally anything. They generally were never going to be like planned out or followed through on. It was really just to get some wargaming experience for the folks who were doing this kind of stuff and behind the scenes. And so that's kind of what it was. There were war plans that were followed through on. I think War Plan Pink was the one that we had for a war in the Pacific against Japan. And we actually ended up bringing that one into full scale when the war began. And we also had one for a war in Europe as well, which we also brought into full scale as well. But no, there was really no like danger or fear by either side that the United States was going to invade Britain and Britain was going to invade America. It was more so just a war plan to make one. And we still have war plans like that in the Department of Defense. We don't talk about them, like we don't bring them up at all, but we have war plans and contingencies for literally anything. We have a war plan in the United States Department of Defense right now. I don't know this to be certain, but I would promise you all we do, where France ends up conducting a preemptive nuclear strike against America. Like, we have a war plan for everything. Would it happen? Absolutely not. But are we going to be ready if that did happen? Yes, we would be. And so the military just has plans for everything, really, to be entirely honest. And that was one of the more interesting ones, was War Plan Red. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. Great question, though, Bradley Barrows, because that's a very commonly asked question about War Plan Red. But with that, we are on to the last super chat of the night, which is a $2 super chat from Seth Jensen. And Seth said, only been a bit over a week. This is my favorite news. And thank you so much for the support, Seth. And thank you for saying that this is your favorite news channel. We work incredibly hard here on this channel to make sure that folks can be proud of it and enjoy the kind of detail and information that y'all get every single day. If it wasn't for folks like you and the kind words that you were throwing in, we wouldn't be able to know that. And we would toil away endlessly, not knowing whether people enjoyed this channel or not. But folks like you who do enjoy it, give us the encouragement and give us the inspiration to get back at this again tomorrow and pretty much put 100% into it all day, every day, to make sure that this channel can once again live to see another day and continue to cover the news of the struggles, the triumphs, and the tribulations that this Western world goes through on a near hourly basis. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're now moving on into our live chat segment. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to answer a large amount of live chat questions. You do not have to pay on this channel to have a question answered. We always do take live chats. However, that is also greatly limited by how long the news takes, which is taking very long these days. It usually takes about 2 hours on average to cover all of the news. And then there's also usually a great deal of super chats, which take up a good bit of time too, although those people are making this channel possible and helping us to actually be able to do this as a job by helping us to make an income off of this. But nevertheless, we will be making sure to get 3 live chats and the Morse code decoders of tonight's stream. And so moving on into those Morse code decoders, we had just about the entire roster. Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J., Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Heroic Fluffiness, and Arbel Garbo. And the Morse code for today, the axis of evil may seem of sound design, but the cracks always bubble to the surface. And long live the LSA. And and that is the sound of money, and they hit it down on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night, and I gotta congratulate y'all for getting that correct, because if it wasn't for y'all toiling day and day to get that Morse code message out of the intro, we wouldn't be able to know exactly what it is right now. And so a big thanks to y'all, and a congratulations once again. And we are on to the third to last question of the night, which goes to Uncovered Cube. And Uncovered Cube said, do you think Russia even has the equipment to move all the North Korean troops into battle all at once? And if they can't, won't it be easier for Ukraine to pick them off? Technically, they do. The Trans-Siberian the Trans-Siberian Railway is capable of transporting a large number of people across the entirety of Russia. So they do have the ability to get them there. And if they can't get them all in Western Russia at a single time, they can just hold them back until they're able to get all of them across Russia and then stage them as a complete core. So they can do that. It's just that the Ukrainians are still going to pick them off one by one, because all of the North Korean forces are not going to be on the front line at a single time. But moving on from that, a big shout out to Don Melville, who threw in a 5, their first super chat ever. And Don Melville said, thanks for the videos, and thank you so much for enjoying the short war videos and streams. We put a lot of work into them, and we're glad to know that a lot of people are enjoying them these days and really just loving the channel. I mean, we've gotten a load of subscribers over just the past few days. This channel, crazily enough, has actually grown about, let me see here, about 4,000 subscribers just in the past 48 hours, just in the past 2 days. And we love to know that loads of people are finding this channel and really seeing that they do enjoy the kind of news that we cover and the way that we're doing it. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night, which is going to A.F. Kaplan, an old guard and a channel legend. And A.F. Kaplan said, if the whole of Chechnya were to be an open rebellion, how much manpower from the Ukrainian front lines would need to be diverted by Russia to address it? At least 40 to 60,000 men, in my assessment, would be needed to try and just contain the Chechen uprising. So it would be a massive drain from Russia's combat abilities inside of Ukraine, and that would tip the scales into Ukraine's advantage. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the final question of the night, which goes to Rick B. And Rick B says, you guys think the Israelis' response will be after the election? I don't think so. I would be entirely honest. I think the election is kind of overplayed here in America, to be entirely honest, with the kind of impact it has on worldwide decision-making for other countries. While the election is happening and a new leader for the nation will be picked after the course of that election, regardless of who it is, the United States is still going to have a president after the election. After the election day happens, we still have a president until January, and then that's when the actual change of leadership occurs. So for that reason, I would have to say I don't think the Israelis are going to be waiting until after the election, because if any consequences were going to come, they would still come after the election if the current sitting president does not like the actions that they've made. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And also a huge shout out to Sully Canuck, who also threw in a 20, and said, hope you are doing well, boys. And we are. Actually, Enforcer Matt's gotten off for the night already. That is actually the last thing that we're going to be addressing on air right there. But I still thank you so much, Sully Canuck, for the support all the way from London, Ontario, our LSA Canadian Navy veteran. And I thank you so much once again for the support and enjoying this channel enough to help it to keep on running. But with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching. And if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon if y'all want. Link in the description below. I forgot this isn't a video. For some reason in my mind, I'm actually completely strung out. I'm exhausted right now, to be entirely honest with y'all. For some reason, I thought I was recording a video right there, so I told y'all to go support the Patreon. But nevertheless, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
Yes. The Lee